Coming up this week on the Markcast, cue the sound effect. Law and Order, the Markcast returns. The XFL is being sued. Together, the company owned in part by Sue Bird that I've just spent the morning Googling and researching how to pronounce is suing the XFL, the Rock's XFL as they call it, over trademark infringement. Then we have a real-life, honest-to-goodness ESPN reporter. Kevin Seifert joins the show to talk all things XFL and alt football. I just don't know where we're at right now, and I just feel like not as much has been done as should be done.
Yeah, and it's a fair point, and I don't think it's necessarily an example of them trying to do things behind the scenes without people knowing about it, because you would think that all publicity on that would be good.
You know, when friend of the show, Mike Mitchell, calls and says he wants to come on, you need to take that call. Getting ready to have a late night recording tonight with Mike Mitchell. Even as I record this promo, I don't know what shenanigans we're going to get into. USFL stuff, you have your shot ready. I've opened my second shiner.
Here we go. All right, yeah, it looks like you've been drinking already. Okay, so for the purposes of this occasion, this is joining the mix, a logo that'll probably be extinct very shortly, or if it isn't already. Yeah. I got the whiskey here, so here we are. I'm sure this will be posted all over social media.
There we go. We got past all the confidential XFL stuff. So USFL ratings, right? You talk to everyone. You email Nielsen. You talk with the Fox Sports people. You talk with all these different people. Like USFL ratings, if they are higher than what was even the lowest expectations, don't have to drink. If they were lower than even the lowest expectations, take a shot, please. Finally, Mark Drumheller, betting analyst over at Yahoo Sports, joins me to preview USFL Week 8, giving his thoughts on all the weekend's matchups.
I think that there's ways that they can engage people that are really trying to push the content and are excited about the league better than what they are right now. And I think that there's, room for them to improve there.
This might be a crazy episode this week. Could be a long one. Buckle up. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Markcast. It's been a roller coaster of a week here. I really appreciate everyone. We're coming off of the high, picking up the broken pieces of our hearts of the not ever came June 1st announcement, right? Randy Carricker over in St. Louis, the team, cities, names, all that stuff was coming June 1st. We did not get all of that. I was a little fiery on social media. I think I'm calmed down now. I have my Fan Control football jersey on. Thank you, Van, for that. Getting ready for a fun show today. I'm going to keep this really brief. I think Mike and I are going to go long tonight. I already have a great conversation in the can with Kevin Seifert and Mark Drumheller over at Yahoo Sports. But I just want to thank everyone for stopping by today. Please like and subscribe. Trying to hit that 2,000 subscriber mark. Lots of stuff coming up. I have lots of spokes in the fire for next week. Could be a lot of CFL content coming your way as well with the kickoff next Thursday as you are listening to this. The big news today, I'll get into it with Mike. I think Mike has differing thoughts than I do. I think Mike is kind of poo-pooing the lawsuit, but I'm curious to get into it with Mike. TOGETHXR, that. Hey guys, future read update here. So it's pronounced together, as in to get her. That's courtesy of Jessica Robertson, the company's chief content officer, doing some Googling. How the heck do you pronounce, super, what are we doing here? It's together, to get her. Been calling it like TOGETHXR. I think I edited out all my dumb mistakes, but this is read. We're all learning together. Together, suing the XFL, trademark infringement. Thanks. They had filed kind of a cease and desist and had a kind of a shouting match on Twitter a little while ago about that. Now they have officially filed a lawsuit with the XFL over trademark infringement. As you're listening to this, the XFL has gone back and removed their initial promo video that they played when they did the new brand reveal and all of that. They've removed the word together in that now. I've posted it on Twitter. I had the original one saved from kind of when all that stuff came out. TMZ is reporting this. Curious to see where this comes out. I've emailed, friend of the show, Michael Cohen, our trademark and IP rock star. Maybe we'll get him on next week. It might make more sense to kind of see what official paperwork they file right when the complaint comes out, because it's a multi-step process. we'll be talking with that. This is interesting. It was kind of a divisive brand reveal, revamp when it all came about. And now to think that they're going to be going through potentially, legal hurdles that way. These things add up. You buy the league for $15 million. You think we're going to flip it around. Now we spend money on a brand revamp. Maybe we got new logos for teams, all that kind of stuff. All these things add up. Just kind of curious to see where all this goes about. I don't think a lot of fans would be sad to see the new XFL logo either change or revert back. Curious to see where all that goes. I'll talk about that with Mike. Like I said, Kevin and I, ESPN, really appreciate Kevin, busy guy covering Vikings, getting ready for the NFL season and all of that. Thank you so much to Kevin Seifert for coming on. Really good conversation. Kevin's followed the XFL 2020. He's interviewed the Daryl Johnsons of the world, all the XFL, parts throughout the years. I really appreciate Kevin sharing his time and expertise today. And then Mark Drumheller, I thought Mark is great. Talking all things USFL, looking at it from the sports gambling. We've been doing that a couple weeks, but Mark's got a crazy in-depth knowledge of all the rosters because he's kind of going through and pulling a lot of that data on his own that the league isn't providing. So it's really kind of forced Mark to do a deep dive, but in turn that makes him really knowledgeable, to get him on here to talk about things. So really appreciate that. Mike and I are going to record late night tonight. I got to go to a wedding show and then come back. So that could get a little loopy. I'm scaring myself thinking about it. We'll see how long we go. I think I've got, maybe hour 15 in the can right now. This could be a long one, but I really appreciate you all for spending the time. I know Mike has promised lots of Easter eggs in our chat tonight. And like I said, when friend of the show, Mike Mitchell, calls and says he wants to talk XFL, USFL, and CFL, I definitely want to answer that call. Like I said, make sure to tune in next week. Should have some stuff I'll be posting on social media here coming up. Maybe I'll tune back in at the end of the show, but Mike and I might just say goodnight from there. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Well, I'm thrilled today. We have Kevin Seifert here, ESPN, and a Vikings writer as well. I'm excited to cover all that. How are you doing today?
I'm real good. Thanks for having me.
This is good. Like I said, I don't always call in favors, but when Mike Mitchell can put me in contact, and Mike wants to be on the show today too. I think Mike is anticipating lots of interest in your thoughts today on everything. So first off, here we are. We're I guess steadily approaching XFL 3.0. It does feel like a little bit waiting. What have been your thoughts so far on the XFL kind of rebrand as we are?
Well, it's just been interesting. I think part of it is trying to sort of compartmentalize the image that we had of XFL 2020, 2.0, same way we did that with XFL, the original in 2020, and trying not to assume that they're just going to pick up where the previous incarnation left off. And that's not to render a judgment one way or the other, but it's a different ownership group. They have different priorities and different personalities. And I think one of the things that's been I've been really interested to find out, and we're just starting to get a glimpse, is kind of how they think of themselves. I think we knew that the 2020 version was very locked in on sort of reimagining the game and innovating rules and, having, really robust local markets, by putting, the franchises in the markets as opposed to practicing somewhere else or playing somewhere else. And so I think at the very least, we had a very clear idea of what they were trying to do and accomplish. And unfortunately, we never got a great rendering of whether that was a good vision or not. There were a lot of optimistic signs, but the pandemic shut that down. And, now what they did has sort of been picked up a little more universally. The USFL picked up a lot of the things that the XFL 2020 did. So what I'm waiting on now is how this 2023 version of the XFL will envision itself. They've talked a lot about wanting to improve the football ecosystem, and just benefit the whole sport and league, but we haven't gotten a ton of specifics. And I think we're getting closer to that. But I think the big takeaway so far has been, and I'm sure a lot of fans have been the same way, is trying to not make the assumption that they're just going to pick up where the last league left off.
Yeah, I'm running out of kind of distinguishing features that they can use, right, to incorporate it. I mean, for right or wrong, USFL has brought in, like you said, a lot of the things. We've had Sam on the show before talking rules and stuff. And
Sure.
like, for right or wrong, a lot of the good rules, a lot of the good technology, the mic cams, even when Dany and The Rock were at the Disney up fronts, I mean, obviously they're not going to divulge a lot there, but it was, okay, we're going to have new technology coming out here. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what they're going to do to distinguish where the USFL is doing a lot of good things right now.
Yeah, and and one of the points that Daryl Johnston from the USFL made when I spoke with him before the season is that and he was freely talking about the upcoming competition between the XFL and the USFL, such that it is that. And this was before ESPN signed on to be the XFL's partner. But the USFL is owned by a TV company itself, in Fox Sports, and so they certainly would be on the cutting edge of any technology and any sort of broadcast innovations. And so he was sort of making the point that honestly, like, a good luck to whoever tries to take us on in terms of creating a better broadcast or a better use of the technology that's available. But that's and again, that was before ESPN signed on, and technology evolved so fast that I'm sure people have long been at work on coming up with different ways to broadcast the XFL. And so that'll all play out. But again, I think the XFL has the great advantage of having The Rock, sort of just like they have a high floor in terms of fan recognition and attention from fans and the public. Like, they're already going to get a lot of eyes that wouldn't otherwise come to another professional sports league, and how they choose to use that and what they sort of make their personality beyond that, it remains to be seen.
My concern has always been, and Dany and Redbird and all them involved in all these different projects, right? And Terramana and Zoa, and we're buying AC Milan, and we're doing all these things.
Yeah.
But like, the people that love the XFL really loved what that was, for right or wrong. And I know it's weird because like we only got the 5 weeks, and like we fought with CFL fans about this during that whole thing because they have all this history. And it's like, I understand wanting to come in and buy your own thing, right? But like I've always said, at that point, just call it like the Rock Football League. Like, we're buying the XFL, but then we're like, unless you have Battlehawks, Dragons, all that, you're going to get a lot of people that are concerned for better or worse. Yeah,
and maybe just concerned because they don't know what's coming, and something will be coming, and they will. While I know that with Dany Garcia and Redbird and The Rock, there's plenty of other projects they're working on. They've built out a pretty extensive front office. Starting with Russ Brandon, who's the president. People who are pretty solely devoted right now to developing the XFL, a much bigger front office than the USFL has, or any other league other than possibly the XFL 2020 had. And so I do think that there's a lot of smart people working on this, not round the clock, but certainly as their relatively full-time jobs. And so, in the end, the owners will do what owners often do, which is provide the vision and provide the budgets and provide the financing and all of that. But a lot of the nitty-gritty work that we're talking about and the things that fans will ultimately attach to or decide not to attach to is probably in a thought bubble right now amongst those front office people.
Does it concern you that we're still discussing rumored cities and that we don't have the actual, presumed 8 cities that they're going to be playing in February?
On a relative scale, no. The USFL, and I hate to keep bringing them up, but it's important to have context. Like they didn't even have coaches, I don't think, until like 6 weeks before the season started, or 2 months, and they've pulled off, the season that they have so far. And so I think, while I understand where you're coming from, that like you want to start ingratiating yourselves in those markets, and you want to start, identifying your fan base and inviting them out to things and getting them involved. I also know just from having, reported on the XFL 2020 that it's a pretty enormous lift from a logistical standpoint to get all the, insurance, the employment insurance and workers' comp and stadium rentals, leases, all that stuff gotten done from a legal sense. It's a pretty enormous lift, and it's probably one of the reasons the USFL went to the model that they did, because it's not only expensive, but there's just a lot of paperwork that has to be done. So my guess is that they've long since identified who those cities are going to be, and it's just working through the legal process of nailing it down to where they can actually have people work there, have people play there, have a place to play. There might be a few cities who are a little gun shy given the bankruptcy of it's not the current owner's fault, but the bankruptcy that left some leases unpaid from XFL 2020. And so you would certainly want to know and be able to start marketing as soon as you can. But I think it's probably most likely attributable to just the logistics of that endeavor.
Do you think that, just more of a philosophical question, like knowing kind of the hurdles, like you said, with the twice failed league, I have my sign, like all these things with the XFL, would you have just started the new? I mean, like, would you have just called it Kevin's Football League? I mean, do you think that there's enough goodwill there in fan base versus just, hey, the Rock's starting the Football League, like we could just go for it? It's just weird that it's always so attached to those three letters.
Yeah. And I do think, to me, like, I'm certainly not a business person, but like name recognition would seem to be pretty important. And if you can enter the market without having to tell people who you are, there's benefit to that. I don't think there's a negative connotation that it's necessarily would be dragging them down or in any way like making it worse than Reed Johnson's league. I did talk to a sports business expert one of the times, I think right after the league went bankrupt and it was put on the market and eventually these guys bought it, was how many times do you just say like, well, this brand has not succeeded for whatever reason. There's not necessarily one specific thing. It's not Vince McMahon's fault or, he hate me fault, or anything, one thing in specific, but just like generally speaking, it can become associated with a failed business. And so just from a marketing standpoint, is that a good idea? But in the end, I think they will enter the market, and it's probably why the Fox Sports, decided to change, basically what they did is change the spring league to USFL. And people certainly know I think football fans certainly know what the USFL was. I don't know if they necessarily identified with the team names. It's been a long time. I'm 49 years old. I remember watching the New Jersey Generals, but people younger than me, wouldn't necessarily have done that. And so, but they certainly didn't have to explain, like, here's what the spring league is, or here's what the UFL is, or here's even what arena football is. They enter the market with everybody knowing they're a spring alternate football league that has pro caliber players, some of whom have been in the NFL, some of them who will be going to the NFL, many of whom you knew in college. And so like that base is well known and will help them at least in the short term. And, whether the brand itself is a reason for failure or not, I don't know, but that's certainly a fair question to ask, when you're talking to, sports business type people.
Now, you are not aware, but just the very mention of the Spring League now being the USFL, there are many people probably angrily typing on this. I've long maintained that, like, it is a USFL is a Spring League with a different coat of paint, right? We need to get into the cities and stuff, but nothing this year has dissuaded me from that. I mean, we have fancier cameras and drones and things involved with it, but it is still very much that. Even the roster sizes and all of that. I mean, it's interesting that they've gone that route. Like you said, they don't have to we don't have to tell people what that is, right? I guess there's enough people with the USFL. I mean, in terms of like USFL mainstay right now, I don't want to get too far off the XFL topic, but like, has that resonated a lot with you and the work you're doing? And have you been aware of everything going on in Birmingham?
I have honestly felt like I haven't kept up with it as much as I did the XFL in 2020. And some of that is just probably the fact that, ESPN was carrying the XFL and hasn't carried the USFL. That was not a text from an angry fan, by the way. It's just, okay. I don't know how to turn this off okay. on the machine, but I think they have. I mean, to be honest, in talking to Daryl Johnson before the season started, he said, I asked him, what would success look like? And he said, if we get to the end of the season, we play our conference title games and then the championship game, and we've completed a season, then we pop open champagne and start talking about year two. That in itself is a roaring success in the context of recent spring football leagues, AAF and the XFL 2020. And so I think they're pretty close to accomplishing that goal. I'm not aware of anything that's going to keep them from continuing to play at least through the end of the season. And it'll be up to Fox Sports, just like it was up to Vince McMahon, to decide whether it wants to subsidize another season. But all indications are that it wants to. And so anything short of that, getting through the end of the season would have been, or anything more than that would have been gravy. I haven't seen like any like really innovative schemes or even players that I'm like, oh, we better write his name down, for this upcoming NFL season. But in the end, they're probably going to have accomplished more than any of the recent spring league ventures have done, and that in itself is notable.
Yeah, because the thing, I mean, what's interesting with you is, right, I mean, you cover NFL, primarily most of the time, but you have an interest in these. Like a lot of the mainstay NFL guys will cover XFL stuff like because they have to, right, or because it's sent along. You have an interest in this. These are leagues that you. Why is it that you feel the need to cover those things and put your weight on that as well?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of evolved. I remember doing a story maybe 10 or 12 years ago just about how it was an anniversary of the NFL Europe ending and how the NFL still had no, developmental league and there was no real alternate leagues that had popped up, and there was a huge need for it. You don't have to talk to many people in the football ecosystem to know that college football in itself can't support the development of players that the NFL would need. And that story really resonated. One of the great things, as about digital journalism, is we know exactly how many people read things. We know how long they read them, and there was huge interest there. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then as various leagues came about, it was just really kind of fun to follow people's attempts to capitalize on how popular football is. And I love football myself, and more football is better for me personally, and I like it, and I'm happy to watch it in the spring, and I don't feel like it's an overdose or anything. So I've been interested in a personal way. And then, when the XFL came around, like I was super nerding out with Sam Schwartzstein on all of the rule changes that dovetails into another of my interests, which is just how to evolve and how the game evolves and to innovate it. And they didn't have any of the, the institutional, sluggishness that the NFL has. So they were able to dive into it. And it was really interesting to know that when they did their focus groups and they showed them different things that they were thinking of, the fans sort of pulled them back a little bit and said, too much. We don't want, people being able to throw passes when they're 8 yards down past the line of scrimmage. That's not football. We don't want certain things. And so it was interesting to see where the limits were. And so I was just really excited to see what it would look like on the field. I loved that it made football institutionalists feel weird and uncomfortable to see the kickoff, people standing as the ball was in the air. That just from a sadistic standpoint, I guess I liked to see that it riled people up. And I want football to make it to the next generation. I don't want there to be this constant cloud over the sport with people questioning whether it can't be played because it's too dangerous or it's too many injuries or whatever. I want people to be able to innovate it in a way that extends it to another generation. And so that, is a long answer to my, to why this is interesting to me. And in the end, whether it's XFL, USFL, AAF, our readership shows that there's data shows that there's a lot of interest in it. And so, then why not?
It's interesting. So, XFL 2020 had this, 2-year runway, right? And all the different, and we're testing, Sam, we're at the spring league testing, we're testing with college games, doing all these halves, building in the markets. A lot was made of the USFL not doing a lot of that, right? Here we're coming in, like you said, announcing coaches. Well, now, here we are with the XFL, we're June, so we're 6-7 months out, right? I don't see a lot of those same things, right? I mean, okay, presumably we bring in Sam's rule book, but not Sam. I mean, that's a discussion for another day. But friend of the show here. But we bring in Sam's rule book. We have coaches, right? We're working on leases. I just don't know where this we're going to have a 2-year runway again or a year-long runway. I just don't know where all that time is going now. I mean, I know we talked with the CFL for a long time, and that took a lot of attention away. I just don't know where we're at right now, and I just feel like not as much has been done as should be done.
Yeah, and it's a fair point, and I don't think it's necessarily an example of them trying to do things behind the scenes without people knowing about it, because you would think that all publicity on that would be good. Part of it, I think, is they paid $15 million or so for the league for basically, and I remember talking to Jeffrey Pollack and during that sale time, and one of the things they were marketing is we've done all that groundwork. We've done all the focus groups. We've done all the experimenting. We know, at least in 2020, what was going to work and what was not going to work. And this is what you're buying. You're buying all this, startup energy that we already, combined and collected. And so that's not to make an excuse or to try to say they don't need to be working hard right now, or they don't need to be finding, the next step or finding something more. But I think that they bought the team with the idea that a lot of that stuff had already been done, and they have, they have the evidence-based information to implement the plan, for their league more quickly. I mean, they were marketing it at the time as, hey, you can buy the XFL in the summer of 2020 and have a bubble season in the spring of 2021. And so I don't think that was necessarily realistic, but I do think the 2022 season was realistic. And the CFL thing maybe was a little bit of a cover for the fact that they just hadn't gotten around to, or at least gave them the cover to delay it another year. I don't think there's any reason they would want to be delaying because they spent the money. You might as well start getting going. And, but I think those are fair questions. We don't know as much about the XFL 2023 as we did about the XFL 2020 in the summer of 2019, I guess. And again, some of that is because the work has already been done, and some of that is because I think they're still trying to figure out exactly what they are.
I know. And that's what is, because I will tell you, and like I said, I know they work on all these different projects. XFL fans really know what, or they think they know what the XFL is. And I know that, you don't want to get caught in the minutia of the Twitters and Facebooks of it all. But I think that when you start alienating your hardcores, that's what's interesting is seeing things shift, and The Rock comes back, and even this week we had Randy out of St. Louis saying news was going to come out, and people got excited, and then of course it didn't happen, and then people, XFL again, they fail. We're not, and so people are really living and dying by all of this, and I just don't know if. Do
you think that they're just impatient, or do you think that that they're truly alienating people by not having their plan set this soon?
I think as funny as it is, The Rock endorsing Joe Biden 2 years ago is a major divisive point in the XFL fan base. First and foremost, I wouldn't think that. I don't really care
way
about
over
that.
my head. Yeah,
way over my. That is a very divisive point. And then I think that people are very scared. Like, I live in LA, I live in New York. We're not going to have teams there. I'm Battlehawks, Kaka. That's not coming back. Like, I think people are very. I think it's the fear of it. And when Dany had come out, I think it was that Sportico report and said, like, oh, we have all these fun ideas. We just haven't had a chance to share them. And then the first thing they have to share is like the new logo that goes over like a wet fart. People don't like that. Okay. Now Megan Rapinoe is suing. We talked about that off camera, but like, so there's just a lot of like, there hasn't been many positive like good steps along the way. I mean, the coaches came out, was good. So I think that's where it is. I just don't think that we have. I don't know, the XFL before, we had Oliver Luck. We're doing the press conferences. We're announcing Jim Zorn and stuff. That was exciting. It just felt like there was a little bit more like tentpole events to kind of go along with the whole time.
I mean, that's totally fair. And like, I think, every ownership group is going to be different. So, I think to me, that feels like what you're describing feels like kind of leftover angst that something everybody was really excited about went away. And, it's not an easy thing to follow for this new group. Because I enjoyed the XFL 2020. I was invested in its development and wanted to see how it was going to turn out, and knew a lot of the people in the different cities as a lot of the fans did as well. And I'll tell you, I mean, just the people who work for the XFL still have the bad taste in their mouth that they really felt like they had stumbled on something, not stumbled, but had created something very unique and very promising and separate from a lot of what you see in the pro sports space in general in this country. And we're just so bummed, and that's a kind word to use, that it got taken away, with the pandemic and then later the bankruptcy. They really, I mean, you spend 2 years building to something that lasted for 5 or 6 weeks, basically. And so I can totally get where fans are on that, because a lot of the people who work for the XFL feel the same way at the 2020 XFL. And so I get where they're coming from, and I can see where they'd be frustrated. I think it's probably in the best interest of the business that they're going to start coming out with a lot of details pretty soon. And it's, whether it's the summer or in the fall, this summer, there tends to be less attention on news over the summer. So we'll see exactly what the timing is, but I get that in this particular moment, it can be really frustrating.
No, and I've said all along, I mean, because we dealt with the CFL homers and all that, and I said, XFL people, this is a new vision. This is, I'm kind of fine with whatever, but it is just fascinating. Before I let you go, because I promised you a certain amount of time, obviously, you're with ESPN and all that, but I think that you can also, have your analytical hat, right, where you cover all this stuff. New XFL TV deal, right, with Disney, ABC, all that stuff. Thoughts on that and how that was all kind of rolled out here, I guess, 2 weeks ago now? Yeah,
I mean, as there'd been rumors about it for a long time, especially once Fox and NBC, teamed up to do the USFL. You figure, well, they're not going to also do the XFL. And so that I don't have any inside knowledge about how the TV deal came, but to be, but, it was, they needed to, it's no secret. You need to be on TV, and not just TV, but you need to stream, and you need to have options for everybody, no matter how they consume sports nowadays. And so the ESPN Plus thing is huge for that. And I think that, if there's one thing we can say for sure, is that this ownership group knows show business, and has connected with a company that, in Disney, that also knows show business. And so I think that connection tells you that there's a pretty, good chance that the production of the games is going to be really good. And that should be, to me, not somebody who works for ESPN or Disney. It's just like, I would think that no matter what, is that's a pretty good combination for live storytelling. And I think that's an area where hopefully you'll see a lot of things that you've never seen before on sports broadcasts. And, in terms of giving insight into players and the coaches and their lives off the field and on, there's a real opportunity there. And so I think that while, maybe the pie shrunk, given that Fox and NBC, which were in on it before, had gone in a different direction, there was a pretty good network still there for them, and it got off to a from an advertising standpoint, it obviously got off to a good start up front, and now they'll have to do the hard nitty gritty work of earning the fans and the viewers' interest.
Yeah, I mean, it does just feel like it was the deal from 2020 without NBC or Fox or whatever. I mean, again, like you said, the pie is shrunk. It's nothing you can do. I mean, Fox is, in bed with USFL. I mean, literally, but it does feel like it's the same, but just, cut off. And like, if you look at the XFL TV schedule, I had it like on my phone. I was like going through my favorites and I was like, oh yeah, like FS1, like ESPN. Okay. Like, I didn't realize the XFL championship game was going to be on ESPN. I never realized that. I would assume that would
like the day after the draft, I think is when it was going to be.
Yeah.
So it was like literally I want to say it was either the championship game or the playoffs. Something was going to happen. Like they basically built the whole schedule right around the NFL schedule. So start the season right after the Super Bowl and championship game the day after the draft when there would be no other competition.
Last question for me, and this is perfect segue. Do you like the February to April here XFL timeline or the April to July USFL timeline?
Well, I mean, from a football standpoint, I think that the February to April is better. I certainly was watching more of the XFL than I have of the USFL. And I feel like I've been consuming at least as much sports content, with the NBA playoffs. I live in Minnesota. The Timberwolves were in the playoffs in the first round. I was really into that. The Wild, in hockey were in and so I feel like I've been watching a ton of sports, but not as much football. And, the idea behind the XFL starting February is that the original research and analysis was that there was this huge yearning for more football after the Super Bowl. And there used to be the Pro Bowl, but that isn't really anything that gets anybody excited anymore. And so you basically don't let people go find something else. Like, here's some more football, and it's an easy thing to market and an easy thing to remember. Okay, next Sunday I'll be watching the XFL. And so I personally like that better. Like it might also work better as a segue towards the NFL for players who, play in that season and then can still get into some spring, tryouts or workouts and then be ready for training camp. Whereas a USFL, the USFL is missing, all those players are missing these OTAs and mini camps. If you think those are a big deal or not, we could have a separate argument on that. But, so I personally liked the February, to April. And I don't know that the TV ratings for the USFL have been much different than what the XFL was. So I don't know if it really made a TV difference, but from a personal standpoint, I felt like I would watch more football during that time period than during the late spring.
Yeah, I really did think the April was better, or give people a little break. And now I'm like, oh, it's Memorial Day. Like, I do weddings. I'm filming weddings now on the weekend. Sure. Like, people are going to barbecues. And so I didn't think it was going to be as big of a deal. And the ratings, Memorial Day weekend ratings were not good for the USFL. I mean, a lot of the games were on cable, but, we got like 268,000 on FS1, which is a far cry from what the XFL did. So,
yeah.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. Get back to all the NFL, like OTAs and all that stuff, and the Kirk Cousins of it all. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm thrilled today. We have betting expert with Yahoo Sports, Mark Drumheller here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's, getting in through the summer now. We have the summer sports going on. So a lot of action going on, especially with the USFL and, some of the other small markets, CFLs cooking up. So doing very well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this is good. The sports betting, fantasy, all of this has given me lots more people to talk to about this stuff. And what I like about you, you work for Yahoo Sports, and you cover everything. So I'm always curious because obviously you have the insights about the USFL, but ratings came out today as I'm recording this, and we're arguing about USFL ratings. And so I like that you can kind of speak to the larger sports picture as well. So we're hitting week 8 here. We're going to have our big Legion Field games this weekend. What have you made of 7 weeks and change of the USFL so far?
Yeah, I think it's been a lot of fun. And I think, the people that are really watching it on a week-to-week basis and have given it a shot, have been pleasantly surprised in how the play has improved, over the course of the season. One of the big betting angles that I took advantage of the past couple of weeks has been the overs, right? Because the offenses have consistently gelled, gotten more better on a week-to-week basis, where the last 2 weeks, teams are averaging 24, 25 points a game. So we're seeing that scoring tick up. And I think, listen, some of the catches you're seeing out there, some of the players really are making some great plays. And, I think the play on the field has consistently got better. Obviously, the beginning of the season, it was a little rough, a little spotty, right? They gave these guys 3 weeks of training camp before, they met each other 3 weeks later on the football field trying to execute, intricate offensive schemes. So it took a little time to develop. But I think what you're seeing now, as far as quality of play on the field, I think it's been good and it's been exciting. The games are competitive as well.
When it came for you to be covering USFL, was that a you decision? Is that a Yahoo? How does that work to say, hey, we're going to make this, make an effort to have this content be available?
Yeah, it was a me decision. So I've always liked the smaller markets, and especially from a betting perspective. Not to get too deep into it, but it's a lot easier when you're betting into a market, with a league that is a new and a startup, as opposed to the NFL or the NBA, where these sports books have their best guys making those lines, right? Where they don't get as much action on these smaller leagues, so there's a little more opportunity for you to take advantage of. But I've always liked these leagues. The one thing that I like about it is that, there's not a lot of teams, right? So you can learn these teams inside and out pretty quick. You can watch all, if not, the majority of the games every weekend. So you see every team play, where in the NFL, it's a little bit more difficult, right? It's hard to kind of go through the all 22 and sit through 16 different games, right? But with these smaller leagues, you can watch every game, every play real quick over the weekend, and kind of pull in all that data, to cultivate for the following week.
I totally agree. I mean, that's the same with CFL. We do CFL fantasy, through their site. And I know Mark that runs News Hub. We have a new News Hub fantasy too. And I know Yahoo has stuff like that. But I can't get my head around, like you said, trying to watch, you got 16 whatever matchups and trying to figure out CFL and USFL, we got 4 matchups. You kind of figure it out. We were talking before, a little wonkiness, right, with rosters and stuff. It seems like, and the other people I've had on the show, USFL has gotten better about getting this stuff out in a timely manner, injuries and roster reports. Are you feeling that way as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as the league matures, they'll get better as they have more resources. And part of it is when you start a new league, it's what does your consumer want? You know what I mean? And I think that's a big part of it. So I think the fact that there was such an appetite for, that type of information from a fantasy level, from a DFS level, right, from a sports betting perspective, I think that they were probably not as prepared for that and expected that feedback, so quickly and abruptly. So, I think they moved to make those changes. But, this year is obviously a learning experience for the league itself and kind of their consumer base and as far as what they want. And, I think that they'll kind of learn as they go to get through this year so they can kind of gear up next year and, have a much more polished product.
Yeah, it's just hard because, like you said, we're, and ratings come out, we're talking all this stuff. And like you said, I think, sports gambling, fantasy, it's a huge part of it, right? And I just don't know, I don't know what audience they're trying to attract right now, right? I think it's okay, we have football on TV, that is step 1, 2, and 3, we've done what we need to do. And like you said, I think there's little things that they could be doing, it'd be if this game was pulling 2 million a week, it would be different. I would say, like, do whatever you guys want. Like, clearly, but I feel like there's like room where they can grow here. And like I said, having content for you guys, I've had other guys on talking like, oh, well, there's no Adam Schefter or whatever, letting us know, like, there's QB issues or what's going on. It's like, how do you find out all the information? Because like I was looking through your articles before we hopped on, really in depth, right? Like these are the odds, and I don't know any of that stuff. Like it's over my head.
Sure.
Like this is the odds for Philadelphia. Like, how do you figure out all that stuff?
Well, this is a good point, and this goes back to what we previously talked about of how it's nice that it's a smaller league and you can kind of watch all those games. So the other part of that is I pull a lot of data manually, right? There's a couple websites I go to provide stats. FoxSports.com provides some stuff. Football Database provides some stuff. There's a couple spots I can kind of go to, but I actually manually pull a lot of the data and put it together in a way that's beneficial for me as the sports bettor, right? So then I'm able to kind of use that from a content perspective when I'm putting it out. So, I got a spreadsheet, a book, just like everybody else that kind of, I pull the data in each week and I kind of chop it up, and that helps me kind of work through and pick up things that, the average person who's watching might not pick up. Like one of the key instances we talked about how the scoring increased from about week 4 on. Well, in week 3, we kind of saw that, from a yards perspective, the offenses were gaining much more yards. Yards per play was up, total yards was up, but it didn't really reflect on the scoreboard because there was still a lot of turnovers, a lot of sloppy play. The kicking was an issue, right? So people were going 70 yards traveling and then missing a field goal, and it looks like there was no offense, right? So that kind of helped me pick up an edge on the sports books, knowing that, like, hey, the offense is improving, but it's not really showing on the scoreboard yet. So having it a smaller league, being able to pull in that data myself, really makes all the difference. And it kind of forces me to really understand like the ins and outs of each game, why the teams won, what they were good at, what they weren't versus their opponent.
Is that stuff that the league could be and should be maybe doing? Because I'm always trying, I like to criticize a lot, but I always like to tangible stuff. So they should be providing a lot more of that data, right? That you shouldn't have to be scraping all that and putting together.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think as the league matures, the data will get better. And part of it is, and we've seen this with other leagues, right? Like we've seen this with the NHL. It's, before NHL re-signed with ESPN, it was hard to find hockey on ESPN's website, right? And as far you had to go to NHL.com to get that, right? And I think that, a lot of sites and a lot of media outlets are reluctant to cover, just like as many people are reluctant to get invested because they've seen so many of these leagues fail, right? And listen, I think the XFL got a raw deal with COVID. I think that was on its way to being successful, but regardless, these leagues didn't last. So a lot of people don't want to invest the time unless they know that this thing's going to actually have a future. And I think, the media outlets approach it the same way. Like they don't want to invest in resources to kind of cover this unless they know it's going to be around for a full season. So I think the fact that it does look like the USFL is getting through a full season, they're selling tickets for the playoffs. I think it could really impact the way, people, the general public and the media outlets approach the XFL next year and the USFL when it returns for its second season.
It's interesting because you talk about, certain media not wanting to cover, like, USFL is very hesitant about like who they like, even like Birmingham. If you're Birmingham media there, local, like you can only cover the Stallions. Like they're not like the most forthcoming with this stuff. But like you said, I would go on any podcast in the world to ask me to go on, right? Because like not a lot of people are asking me to go on it. Like I'm not too selective with that. It's interesting USFL's mindset of like we're going to be very selective with this, but then also a lot of people are very hesitant about talking about us right now.
Yeah, I think they're still figuring some of it out, and one of the things is like in the betting space, right? Like I've developed a reputation over the past several weeks is like, hey, this guy's like diving into the USFL. Some people think it's crazy, but like I said, I think I can find a greater edge in those markets than some of the more popular markets. But in doing that, right, like, and I'm not saying this from like a personal standpoint or whatnot, but I haven't gotten any interaction with the USFL from a social media perspective, right? So I'm a writer who writes for a prominent outlet in Yahoo, and I'm putting out content for the USFL. I'm getting people excited. I think it's very detailed, and I haven't gotten a like from the USFL, and that's not me begging for attention from them, but that's just kind of saying that, like, I think that there's ways that they can engage people that are really trying to push the content and are excited about the league better than what they are right now. And I think that there's, room for them to improve there. But, I think some of it is, we talk about the USFL in comparison to some of the other major leagues. And I think that's kind of the issue is, and why people get down on the league so early is because of the expectations, right? Like, I don't think anyone's expectations is that this is going to be like the NFL or rival the NFL. The expectations should be more of like the National Lacrosse League or, Major League Baseball, when it's not during playoffs, or, the NHL when it's not during playoffs. Like, it's that type of league. It's a secondary league. It's not meant to rival, the kings of the sports world, the NBA, the NFL. And I think if you go into it with the proper expectations and can appreciate it for what it is, I think it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, my thing is, it's like these unforced errors. Like you said, I think I try to have realistic expectations for what we want it to be, but it's unforced errors that they're doing that, like, these are things you're doing that are like contradictorily like hurting your product. Like you said, I spent thousands of dollars to travel with my wonderful wife during her spring break to Birmingham, to live stream. We did like an opening day show. I mean, I very much know what you mean.
Very cool.
But
yeah.
I know what you mean about putting in the work and feeling like maybe it's not reciprocated back, like some of the work that we're doing here, because that was quite the testament to drag my wife across the country to Birmingham. So
yeah, so you would think from the USFL's perspective, they're like, hey, we got somebody here live streaming, like, let's at least give him a little bit of push from our social media account or something like that. And it just seems like they were kind of, I don't want to say ambivalent to it all, but they're listen, I know that the game is TV ratings, and that's really what matters here. They didn't go to Birmingham because they thought they were going to pack the stadium. Like, they knew what they were kind of getting into, but they thought that from a financial perspective, that was the best way to get through the first year of the league. And all that makes sense. And, I don't worry about it at all. You can turn on Major League Baseball, and a handful of teams got their stands look just like the USFL does on certain days. So not really, concerned about that. But I do think that from a fan engagement standpoint, I think that there are some people that are very invested in the league that are running around, trying to get people excited about it from a content perspective that we don't see the USFL engaging with, right? Like, they should make it a point to kind of reach out to people that are pushing this content. Just even if it's a tweet from the social media account, piggybacking off an article, it's not hard to kind of, search USFL and come up with content, right? And when, there's only a few creators that are doing it. So even just piggybacking off of that or giving it a like, but we don't see that from the USFL. So I think there is definitely like room for them to improve from that perspective.
Well, that's like how I found you, it's like, oh, Yahoo. And I'm like, well, and I never know. I'm like, well, maybe this guy will talk to me. Like, I have no idea, but
sure.
I mean, like, it's not a large circle of USFL content creators. I mean, I think I've interviewed about all of them at this point. So, like,
yeah.
I think that we could do, I mean, even the XFL brought in, they brought in one of the fan podcasts, to do, like, with XFL 2020, they had the XFL show and they brought those guys in and said, like, we're going to, and not that I ever think that, like, I don't want any of that, because I want to be able to say what I want to say. But I'm like, that is the vast difference of kind of what these leagues are looking at, of like, we're going to embrace this sort of stuff, or like, we're not even going to acknowledge that it exists.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about like what the USFL could do better. And again, I'm not saying that USFL should be pushing my content. Like, that's not why I'm here. That's not, the point. But what I'm saying is they should have a greater hand in building the community, right? So, like, they have the opportunity, they have the biggest reach of anybody. So they should be kind of bringing everybody together that does, content for the USFL or that is excited about the league, in a way outside of just putting out a tweet being like, hey, here's the standings, like who's going to be the player of the week, like that sort of thing. Like, find ways to bring these people together that are excited about the league so they can start to build a community, so they have something substantial to lean on when it comes back for the second year.
What's the traction like for your USFL stuff? And like obviously we're not going to compare to like college football or whatever. I know that I was reading through your bio, you talk all that stuff too, but like compared to, I mean, UFC, it's not even the comparison, right? But how do you feel like metrics are for the USFL stuff?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's expectation, right? It's not going to be for everybody. I think me being, in the sports betting space is a little bit different, right? Because it's not about getting people excited like money gets people excited, right? Like if you're winning bets, people don't care if it's on wiffle ball. They don't care what it's on, right? It's money in the account. So, the fact that I've been doing well from that perspective gets people excited, and some of them are like, hey, I can't watch the league, but if you got a bet, you can do it. I do content for the Sharp app, right? We have a Discord that, we got a handful of professional bettors that are in there that are with the Sharp app team, right? They don't cover the USFL. They're busy doing NHL, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in there giving out picks, giving out breakdowns, giving out write-ups for our subscriber base. So they have, that information as well. And the people there's a small, I think it's just like any other community. There's a small sub-circle of people that like it. They were excited in the beginning. They were like, some people outside of the US had trouble streaming the games. But, they're fans of the Canadian Football League, whether they're in Canada or whether they're over in Europe or whatever. Like there's an appetite for it. But it's always starts with a small community. Like I don't get, like sometimes like, hey, listen, if I'm running hot and, winning bets week after week, my content's going to get more traction regardless of what it's about. You know what I mean? But as far as like, the people that are really excited on a week-to-week basis about like what happens with the league. I see a faction of it with the Sharp app, with that community, and I see a faction of it with Yahoo. And I just think that, there are some people that just like football. And it's funny because I think our culture, there's a certain, for lack of a better word, like machismo about like, hey, like, I'm a football fan and I know everything about football. But I think when you find these smaller developmental leagues, it really separates some people that like football and some people that like people thinking they like football, right? And it's kind of, and not saying that if you don't like the USFL, you don't like football. But for me, it's like I've watched these players at the collegiate level. Like, and listen, I've sat up till 2:00 in the morning, like, watching spring league, when the FCS played their season in the spring and breaking down those games and doing that just because that's what I like. Like I like football and the quality of play might not be as good, but I think that part's kind of overblown in the USFL because if, Shea Patterson might be a bad example because he hasn't had the best season, right? But if you rooted for Shea Patterson and you watched them play at Michigan, he didn't get worse. Like he's like these players all played in college and we all root for him, but then they get to like a developmental league that's not the NFL, and all of a sudden their quality of play isn't good enough. And that's kind of the part where I disagree with. Like first couple weeks, the play was sloppy. Don't get me wrong. People are missing field goals all over the place. I get it. But, I think that part of it, like the quality of play and the players just aren't good enough, is a little bit overblown because we'll watch any college football team play. So, and these players are better than those guys.
No, I thought this weekend I had to work a little bit. It was tough with the Memorial Day, but I thought, super compelling stuff, right? We had the first kind of overtime shootout, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had the
very cool, yeah.
Right. It was Breakers, and I was at the Mariner game. I was literally sitting at the Mariner game watching it on my phone because I saw the tweets. But I want to get your thoughts because this is our big USFL segment this week. But I called him like the Mad King, Kirby Wilson. Like he just went like, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones, like full on Mad King, like burn everything. Yep. Like, what did you make of the Maulers game on, was that early Sunday, right?
Yeah. So I think it's like, you look at the Maulers and the season that they had, right? And there were a lot of questions coming in as to whether like, that offense would be built in a way to be successful in this league. Because if we look back at the XFL, the teams that were successful primarily were, you have to have an aggressive offense. You have to be willing to, like, one of the things, like, they had the 3-point conversions in the XFL. We saw Houston really being the first team to kind of go for that and jump up on teams 9-0 with June Jones. And I think that's it. When I was looking at teams to back this season, I thought that was a really good trait to have. Like, I think if Philadelphia, if their, rush defense steps up, like they didn't, and Brian Scott didn't get injured, I think that they'd have a different story this year. But I think that he just, so I had questions about their offense coming into the season, and then you just kind of saw him constantly, like, running on first and second down, putting his quarterback at third and long, bad positions, right? And then not being able to convert on that. And then, he gets off Josh Love, he goes to Kyle Lauletta, and he doesn't work. And now they bring in Vad Lee, who I thought was a good match. I'm like, hey, this is a guy who has some mobility. He wants to be run heavy. He has a quarterback that can escape the pocket, and kind of you can dial up some design runs for him. I thought that was a great opportunity. I bet Pittsburgh when they beat Houston, I thought that was a spot. I'm like, hey, they don't have any film on the offense with Vad Lee. This is a spot where they could be successful. And they win, and then they kind of just revert to, like, you just see him, like, not really, I want to say it just seems like a rough environment with his players. Like, he benches Vad Lee for body language, and, there's a difference between, like, having standards and having, like, but really just, like, jumping all over the players for no apparent reason. And it just seemed like, their play calling is an issue. And I think, Kirby Wilson needs to kind of look in the mirror that way. But I think they've been a little bit of a mess. And it's, I would be surprised, like, if I was the USFL, like, I don't know if I would bring him back, just because of, number one, like, his style of offense isn't really the most exciting, and he doesn't seem like he's getting along with the players. Like, there's issues there, you know what I mean? Like, the culture there doesn't seem good, and he's not having any success.
It's funny, and I'm gonna just myself mark out for a second here. I've had a very successful week on social media. I got retweeted by The Rock this week. That was very exciting.
Nice.
But my second biggest tweet was the first 30 seconds of Kirby Wilson's post-game press conference. And USFL provides all that. And he comes in, he goes like, we didn't execute enough plays. Back to the drawing board. Game's Friday, and so I just tweeted like, grade Kirby Wilson's whatever. People hate Kirby Wilson. There was like 80,000, but like I just couldn't believe that. I go, get this guy out of here. I'm like, I just didn't think it would be so vitriolic, right? I mean, people really don't like him.
Yeah, and it's not likable. Like for instance, like for that game on Sunday, right? And we can talk about like why the Maulers are where they are, right? And it's not like talent on the field. They're comparable, but just the way that he calls plays, it's just, their best player is the wide receiver, and they don't even throw the ball, right? So it's just goofy, and I think the players see that, and I think that's kind of what you were seeing with, the quarterback with Lee, him just getting frustrated with the play calling. Like, it's like, hey, you know what? It's the end of the half. We're just going to run out the clock and go into halftime and not worry about it, right? Just completely not being aggressive in key spots. And as a quarterback, it's hard. Like, when you're running on first and second down every series, and then it's like you got third and long, you're not going to be successful. And I think that kind of wears on the quarterback. And after a while, like, I'd be interested to see what those practices look like during the week, because it doesn't seem like him and the players are on the same page. And I think that, the USFL could do better as far as a head coach. Like, when I look at the Maulers, my impression is this is a guy who just was not ready to make this step, because it's a big part of coaching. And we saw this in the NFL is it's more than X's and O's. Like, you have to be able to relate with your players. You have to have confidence in them. You have to give them, the latitude to make decisions on the field themselves and that sort of thing. It just seems like a really tight ship, man. Like, we laugh about like the pizza chicken salad thing, but there's probably some truth to it that, like, hey, that was an indicator that, it might not be like the type of program that players want to come to and play.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's like we saw this coming. We've had it's like Game of Thrones, right? Like we saw Daenerys, like we
and
saw
it just builds and builds.
Well, no, because I had like turned on the game late on whatever Saturday, right? That was a Saturday game, and I'm sitting there, and they're like, or I guess that was a Sunday game, and they go because Bailey's he's on my fantasy. He's been my big like the Maulers have been horrible, but Gaither has gotten me like lots of points, and they're like. I turned out like Bailey Gaither with his first target of the day, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is not going to be good because that's like that's the only thing the Maulers had. Is like they abandoned that. I don't understand the mindset there of abandoning like literally the one thing that's worked for you guys all season.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, listen, it's like 80, 90 degrees out in the field in Birmingham. Like, I understand wanting to run a little bit more. Like, we've seen that with the Breakers, right? With New Orleans. Like, they have the talent with like Adams and Dixon and Poindexter and those guys. They could throw the ball every play if they wanted to and probably be pretty successful. But you've seen them integrate the running game because as the season progresses, it gives you the ability to kind of keep your defense off the field, wear teams down physically, right? And you want to be more balanced. And I think, that's kind of part of football. But so like, I understand, I'm not saying that like he shouldn't be running at all, but just like, it's so predictable and so conservative that it's like, I just feel like I would be surprised if they brought him back. Like, I don't think that the league's going to be in a position to expand, but I think that, you also want to get coaches in there. Like this is entertainment. You want to get coaches in there that are going to be, colorful and have good personalities and that are going to make the fans want to root for them. And I think that he's just tough. Like he just benches Vad Lee, who pretty much saved him. And, the other part of this too is, you look at, Josh Love, he looked like a different quarterback with Michigan. And Jeff Fisher is not, Mike Martz, right? Like that offense is pretty, archaic itself. And he goes out there against a tough New Orleans team and really, banged up his thumb, but really gave them everything they could handle. And that just kind of shows you that, as players in the league, when they see that, the players in Pittsburgh are like, wow, like maybe if like I got released and went somewhere else, I can make a bigger impact that could get me eyes that might, really, get me an invite into an NFL camp or something like that. Like you don't want the players feeling like they're wasting their career, sitting there playing under Kirby Wilson. I think that's the biggest challenge for them right now.
No, it's like you go on like Survivor and this has been your whole life and you get split into two tribes and you're on the one with like the maniac guy that wants to throw. You're like, but then you're stuck, right? And you're like, well, I'm on the Maulers. I'm never going to whatever. I'm looking here. The games this weekend, I think are going to be a little bit more favorable. I want to get your thoughts on all this stuff before we go. The USA Friday Generals Maulers, right? Are you as high on the Generals, 1A, 1B with the Stallions, or where do you sit with the Generals?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the way it played out, and I'll try and give you the quick synopsis. I was very high on the Breakers, and I was like, hey, like after like the first couple of weeks, I'm like, this is going to be the team that's going to win it. And I was surprised that they got handled the way they did when they played the Generals, because if you think about it, like at that time, the Generals had the opening game against the Stallions, which was just a weird game, right? And then the teams played inter-division. And then they went outside of division, and that was the Generals' first game. So I was expecting them to get kind of like a huge wake-up as far as like level of competition, right? But then you saw them, lean more on DeAndre Johnson. The offense looked much, much better, and listen, I'm familiar with Luis Perez, like when he played in Birmingham in the AAF, and, I kind of followed him with New York in the XFL. So I know he has limitations. And I was like, wow, like after that performance, I'm like, maybe there's like three tiers. There's like the top three teams, Birmingham, New Orleans, the Generals. And then there's the bottom, the bottom tier. You got your Houston, Michigan, and Pittsburgh. And then you got, Tampa and the Stars. They have a lot of talent, but probably can't put it together, right? Tampa turns the ball over too much. Stars can't stop the run. Things kind of holding those teams back. And I really think that's how it is down the stretch. It's really going to come down to, New Orleans, Birmingham, and New Jersey, and it's going to come down to the quarterback position. So, Jamar Smith was great early in the season. I think the last 2 weeks he really struggled. And he's going to have to get a lot better if they're going to end up winning this, New Jersey, it's going to depend on, can DeAndre Johnson come back healthy? Can he perform at the same level? If he can, I think they're live to win the championship. If Sloter is able to rest up these, the following 2 weeks, if they can clinch this week, they can get him some rest, get him healed up a little bit so he's healthy going into the playoffs. I think New Orleans can be live. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens with these quarterbacks in these next 3 weeks, and how healthy they are entering the playoffs.
Real quick before, and we'll talk this weekend, Teamu, what do you make of him? I mean, I watch, and it's really, so like, my timing, like whenever I'm able to sit down and watch USFL, it's always like the worst parts of whatever. Like I'll turn it on and they'll be like, Generals are negative 54 yards or whatever. I'm like, oh, right. This is awesome. But like I watched that whole half. I was driving, I had to go work, and he threw like 3 interceptions in the half. I mean, what is 7 for the season, right? He has the most interceptions of anyone.
He's up there. So Kansas City ruined that boy, I guess, right? And that's really my thing is he finished up the XFL. He was one of the hottest names, I think if that league would have continued, I think they would have been right in the mix, to win the title. Like they played solid defense and he showed a lot of mobility, did some good things in the XFL. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any of it, So the only thing I know that happened, in between that time was, he got an invite to the Chiefs camp and maybe it kind of made him indecisive and affected his confidence or whatnot, because that's what I see. Early in the season, especially, I think what happened is early in the season, I think you saw him, really indecisive, holding the ball in the pocket a lot, not making quick decisions, not being comfortable in what he was seeing. And then I think as the season went on, I think Haley's probably urged him hey, we need the ball out. You need to make decisions. And he's not making the right ones. Right. So, that offense. And again, this is another part of it, right? It's not just Teamu, because that offense can't run against anybody. Right. So nobody has to stack the box. They can drop people back on them all day because they know that they have no running game. They probably have the worst running game in the entire USFL. So that kind of helps defenses kind of pin their ears back from a pass rush perspective, get him pressure, which I don't think he does good with, and then, drop people back in the coverage so he has smaller windows to throw into. But he's definitely not the same guy.
I've seen a lot of we'll see, this proves, and I don't care one way or another, but this proves that USFL talent is so much better because he danced around everyone in the XFL now. But I think something else happened. I think it's a mental thing. Yeah. Like you said, he is not making correct decisions out there.
No, and some of it could be that it all depends on the player's mental makeup. And I'm not saying that as a negative against Teamu, right? But would his experience have been different if he had 2 months instead of 3 weeks to prepare with Tampa Bay and to be under Todd Haley's tutelage before just getting thrown out to the fire with guys that he met 3 weeks ago, right? And, I think all that plays into account. I think, some of the players I think the talent is pretty much similar to what we saw in the XFL. You look at, guys like, Jamar Summers, great cornerback, over at Houston, he had success in the XFL with New York as well. Some of the good guys are still good at that level. And then you see some other guys that kind of step up. But I think what other people have to realize as well is that, the XFL wasn't last season. It was 2020. So there's a 2-year window. So some of the people in the XFL that are playing in the USFL now are 2 years older. And that could be a good thing if it's a young player. They could have more experience, could have developed more arm strength or better athletic traits. Or it could be a negative to where, hey, me physically, right? I'm in my 40s. I can't do the same things I did 2 years ago, right? So, that catches up with you pretty quick.
So games here, I think, right, standout has to be Birmingham or New Orleans at Birmingham, I guess, right? Saturday at noon. I guess that's specific. It updates it for my thing. I kept thinking the Panther Stars was going to be a big one, but see, like, they've fallen to 1-6. Like, I just didn't expect Jeff Fisher's team. What's your number 2 game? I mean, is it Philadelphia Panthers?
It probably is, right? I think from an interest perspective, it is, because I think the two teams are fascinating, right? So you had the Stars, who are probably the team that doesn't belong in the playoffs, but it's going to get into the playoffs, right? Like they have a lot of warts when you look at the way these teams played during the season, right? Philadelphia wins by 1 point in a game where Michigan ran for 250 yards, right? Was -2 in turnovers, and then misses a 21-yard field goal, to win the game, and so, they've since replaced their kicker, Cole Murphy. I think Murphy's is his name, but their kicker kicked a 60-yarder last week before halftime. So I think that's an interesting game. And you look at it from a playoff perspective, right? Stars trying to clinch. They can clinch with a win, right? What does that mean? That means Michigan gets eliminated with a loss. So any hope that Michigan has to make the playoffs and catch the Stars has to start this weekend. So you're seeing two motivated teams, that are, I think, very evenly matched in a game that, Philadelphia kind of stole. And I think that one stung Michigan. They haven't won since they gave up that lead and lost that game. So I think that plays into it. And I think, it's two motivated teams. So that's really what I think sticks out, and it's going to make that one the number 2 game.
Philadelphia is my team. Friend of the show, Brian Scott, then got hurt. Friend of the show, Matt Mangold, then got released. I mean, it's been a struggle. I think they still resemble enough of a team for me to cheer. My jersey has finally been shipped that I ordered preseason. So I think Philadelphia is still my team here headed into the playoffs.
Yeah, so I'm from Philadelphia, so that's the team that I root for. So, and again, I was, like I said, I'm in my 40s, so I was a young kid when they won the championship, back in the first iteration of the USFL, right? And I think maybe that's why I have an affinity for these types of leagues, because the Eagles weren't winning anything back then. So the Eagles were miserable, and it was like, hey, football, we're winning. This is great, right? God bless the USFL. But, so I like them. I root for them. I like the way that they're built. I just wish they could stop the run a little bit better. Like, I think, the quarterback, is it Stripling or 5 interceptions, leads the USFL.
Yeah.
I think he's great, but they've been getting a good pass rush lately that they didn't have in the beginning of the year. I think it's 6 sacks last week. I think they had 4 and 3 the previous 2 weeks. So that could help them out if they can just stop the run a little bit. They did a good job last week against Houston. I was surprised that Mark Thompson didn't have more success, last week. But, one of the things we have to look forward to this weekend, and I think is going to be, really interesting about the other 2 games, is that how the teams like Birmingham and New Jersey approach these games, because they did clinch. And so it's like, are they going to be, take their foot off the gas to try and, make sure nobody gets injured, or are they going to give it 100% to kind of keep the momentum going? Especially a team like Birmingham, who's undefeated. They don't want to get that first loss, but then, you have to worry about injuries. Playoffs are coming in a couple weeks.
It's the rest versus rust. It's a debate as old as time. Kansas City knows a lot about that. Every year, it's always like, is Kansas? Are they going to play everyone going in? They've clinched with 3 weeks to go. Like, what's happening?
Yeah,
I know
and you can't win, because when you rest people and you lose, then it's the rest's fault, right? And then when you sit people and you lose, and then they're retired. So it's like, you're like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Anything else from you? I know you got to hop off here. Any final thoughts?
No, just, I just urge everyone out there that, football's football, man. And if you just give it a chance, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be watching the other things going on. I know it's hard with, Major League Baseball is going on, and March Madness was going on when it started. And, so much is going on, NBA finals. But, I just think the more football, the better. And if we support these leagues and we give them a chance, then they're going to continue to grow, and they're going to continue to get better. And me, somebody who's a fan of football, I would love to have it all year round. Like, I know next year, you know, the talk is, I think the seasons are going to be staggered. So the USFL is going to start, XFL is going to start right after the Super Bowl, and then the USFL is going to kind of carry a little bit later into the spring to kind of get us through summer. So I'll take football 365 days a year. You can sign me up. But, you know, so I just think people out there, if you haven't given it a shot, just support it, you know, give it a chance. You know, the play is not bad, you know, once you get to know these teams and know the players.
Yeah, many months ago, it was said that this was the best time of the year for the USFL to compete, that there was nothing else in the spring sports landscape, that this would be the premiere. And now it's, well, oh my God, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we've got
yeah.
It's just interesting because they had November, December. Daryl Johnson said, we couldn't think of a better time to play. There's no competition. And now it's like, well, I mean, we got Premier League, we got F1. I'm like, well, I don't know which one it is, Daryl. I don't know if it's the best time. I think, though, now, I mean, Memorial Day ratings are down, and I think headed here into June, we'll be curious because it's nice. It's nice. People are graduating. People have barbecues. People have a lot of stuff on the weekend.
Got vacations planned. So it's like, you know.
It's the CFL dilemma all over again. People don't watch CFL in the summer because people go on vacation. So there you go.
Yep. Makes sense.
We have Mark Drumheller here. Thank you so much for taking the time. Maybe we could get you back on here. Really appreciate it with Yahoo Sports and everything else you have going on. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I have an hour 15 of episode in the can already when we enter this right now. So we're at 7 o'clock, 7:08 Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. Mike is hopping on to record. Mike Mitchell, XFL Insider. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Reed, for having me on. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So this is, you know, when Mike Mitchell calls me, says, I want to be on the show. I want to talk, because we're going to talk XFL. We're going to do all that. But, you know, you said you also want to talk some USFL, CFL. When Mike Mitchell asked me to come on to talk, I don't care if we have Kevin Seifert on the show already. I'm going to put Mike Mitchell on the show as well. So we have a jam-packed show tonight. I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate it. It's going to be hard to follow Seifert. I'll try not to mess this up.
No, it's good. And I know that you helped connect us, and that's good. So we're late night. I've come back from my wedding show. I was not wearing my Fan Control football jersey when I was at the wedding show, came back home, got that. I have a couple of Shiner Box. That is my beer of choice from Shiner, Texas. Mike has a shot of whiskey. I think at some point we might do this casual tonight. Just two friends casually talking XFL, USFL, and CFL. How does that sound, Mike?
That sounds terrific. Awesome.
So first off, and I am going to humble brag, Mike is Mr. Humble here, but I didn't mention this at the top of the show. Did you see that I got retweeted by The Rock this week? Did you see that?
I did see that. I thought it was awesome. I think there's going to come a day where The Rock is going to be on your podcast. I'll call it now. And Dany. So that's going to be amazing. And you can see the reach that The Rock has. I mean, he's a social media giant. So I don't really get hung up in this stuff, but I'm sure your impressions were through the roof.
Yeah, we got about 700,000 impressions in about 12 hours on.
Sounds about right.
Well, but The Rock could take a lady had taken a cardboard cutout of The Rock to her prom, and it was really cute. And the cardboard, it looked awesome, like it looked really funny. And I think we had just gotten home. It was like Sunday night. Dorothy and I were sitting here getting ready to watch it. We watched that Cruella movie, and I just saw that, and I retweeted. I said, look at this girl taking the cardboard cutout of XFL co-owner The Rock. And then when The Rock retweeted it, he even said like, "Oh yeah, she was a great date, and like she can't wait for the XFL." So I thought that was cool that it was a little bit of like XFL pub in the tweet. So
very cool. Rock's got a great sense of humor, always has. And so I don't know if I'm gonna have a cardboard cutout of Megan Good, but maybe one day I'll shoot my shot. But anyhow, yeah, that was really cool of Dwayne Johnson to do that. That was awesome.
So first off, talking points, I want to make sure we hit on, because the title of the episode is the XFL gets sued. So we came out today together. I've learned while recording the show earlier that it's called Together. That's how you pronounce it, like to get her, because it's like TOGETHXR, whatever. It's pronounced Together. Suing, I tweeted out, I finally tracked down the complaint they had. The one thing that stood out to me was Together claims if XFL properties, infringement, and unlawful acts are permitted to continue, that's them using the new XFL. together will sustain further damage and irreparable injury for which damage they cannot adequately be compensated by law.
It's a pretty interesting story. I mean, we'll see where things go. I find it funny when people will start off a sentence by saying, "I'm no expert," and then use the term "but," and then give their knowledge. So I'll do it. I'm no legal expert, but I don't know how strong or what the merit is with this case. Like I said, I don't have a legal background. I understand. Look, Reed, you're a small business person. You have your own podcast. You also are a videographer, right? You do. So you do that. So anytime you're running a small business, it can be difficult because you worry that, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into your business, and then you worry about someone else infringing upon your hard work and doing that. So I'm respectful and mindful of that. I understand where there can be some confusion in terms of maybe the brand colors, the fact that both brands use the letter X, the fact that there's a freeze frame for 2 seconds of the word together on screen, also the words purpose and passion and everything else. But anyhow, if you freeze it, you'll see the word together and two separated forms of the letter X. So that look like somewhat similar to there. So I don't know where this is going to end up. The courts will decide that part of it. I can understand the sentiment. I don't want to say little person, but when you're competing against these corporations, it can be very difficult and challenging if you feel that you're being infringed upon. I don't know. Some of the rhetoric there is pretty strong to me. Unlawful acts, irreparable, injury. I don't know about all that, but I understand that's legal jargon again, not my area of expertise. But I don't think Dany Garcia showed up at the facilities and roughed up anybody. So I don't know about this unlawful acts business or irreparable injuries, but I get it. It's not physical. They're talking about damage to their brand. I get that part of it. I'm trying to be respectful of their position on it. I have no stake in the game. But I don't think that the XFL is in any way infringing upon that brand. I know that they have similar colors. They're both using the letter X, but the brands are completely different. The word together, or you pronounce it there, it's together, I guess. But the X itself is silent, I suppose. It's not TOGETHXR. So the XFL doesn't have the word together in any of their branding. They have it in that brief moment in a video, but they're not using the letter X to represent a different letter in any other word. So like they are, and X has always been a part of their brand. That's what the league is called. They have an X in it. So I don't know where this is going to all end up. I mean, let's just assume scorched earth scenario. The XFL has to change their logo. They're still going to be called the XFL. They're still going to be a football league. It's the same theme. It's the same, whether it's silver, yellow, purple, green, whatever the case may be. It's the same theme of culture, inclusivity, and all that. So I just find some of those terms in the legal deal a little bit harsh, because I don't see you got to remind you here, because the XFL had a marketing and a design firm who came up with the brand, and they had to approve it. So it's not like, and I'm sure when you go through this process, these design companies, they'll go through and they'll look at other brands to make sure they're not. So they knew that the letter X could be problematic because there's a lot of companies with it. They knew that perhaps the colors black and white could be problematic, but you can't really copyright colors. Or the word together. And the XFL is not using the word together. It's not part of any of their branding or merchandise or any of that. So I probably rambled on a little too long about that. I'm trying to be diplomatic and respectful towards the other side of this coin, but I don't, again, not a legal guy. I just don't really see the merit in this.
It's funny. So we, our logo, which we're in the process of potentially changing, the Markcast, I've sent you guys some stuff about that. When we started printing, the XFL really hadn't come back online yet. Like, they had just announced everything. And Paul and I, it was funny because we had got some hats printed and some shirts and whatever through Printful. That's the site that we use. And then it was like, once the XFL came back online, we got an email from them and they're like, you guys can't print this anymore. And it was just interesting, because we had gotten away with it for about a month. And I think finally, they had got their legal people and whatever involved, and Printful's like, okay, we can't, we never got like sued or anything, but they were just like, we can't do that. The interesting thing, we've paid the design firm to do this. Now we're going to pay, right, in some way to deal with this legally, right? Whether it's just paperwork or we go to court. But I mean, that costs money, right? I mean, Redbird obviously has lawyers on, but my thing is like, we're sinking costs now into this that didn't need to be, right? We're redoing the logo. We're paying to do that. We did no market research, apparently, because everybody hated the logo. But we have the logo now that we've paid this firm to do. And now we have to pay to defend this logo that we really didn't even need to spend money on at the beginning. I'm just like,
sure.
It just seems
we're entrenched in this. So we've been following the USFL and all these other leagues that have had these trademark issues, it seems like. But, when you start digging deeper into all this, startup businesses, new businesses, all that, they run into a lot of this. So this is a common thing with people who file trademarks and file their own designs. There's always in the marketplace the potential of other people coming forward and feeling that, oh, hey, that looks like my thing or what have you. So this is the XFL. I know Redbird Capital is a very strong entity. So I'm sure on the other side of the coin here together, looking at this situation like, hey, we're the little guys here and they're the big evil corporation. But I think they need to do a little more research on the issue, and they need to look more than just at a freeze frame that has a particular word in it for 2 seconds.
Sorry, I'm on mute there. That was perfect. The interesting thing to me is, Sue Bird, Seattle Storm legend, right? Married to Megan Rapinoe, very strong, like, female advocates, right? In terms of like equal pay. We follow a lot with female soccer, right? And cheer and all that, them trying to get paid the same as men. It's interesting to me that a lot of their ire has been focused on like The Rock's XFL with Dany Garcia, right? One of the most like pioneering champion female.
They're ignoring the fact that there's exactly what you're about to say, but I'm sorry, I had to say it as well. Yeah, they're ignoring the fact that the XFL is, first off, sports league that's going to have a female owner, has a female owner right now, and minority owners. So we're talking about inclusivity and people who are marginalized. So, and I've seen a lot of the rhetoric. I mean, social media everybody has different opinions, right? So I've seen people go get him, get The Rock, look what he did to you. Look what he's doing to women. And, he didn't even design it, first off. And you're also forgetting the fact that there's a female here that owns a major sports league in this equation. So this isn't you've been targeted because you're a marginalized group. You're basically, you're going after someone that, who has a minority ownership and a female owner. So those are groups that have been marginalized in terms of sports ownership. Look around. In the NFL, how many African-American or female owners do you have? There are a couple here and there, but no African-American owners. So minority ownership, you got the cons, but that's been a problem in pro football and sports in general. So I think this is misdirected. I think this is a misunderstanding. I think if any amount of research was done on this particular issue, you'd see that there's no malicious intent here to do irreparable damage or harm. So it's a topic that I'd rather not focus in on too much. I think we'll see how the courts handle it, whether it gets thrown out, whether something gets settled, whether something gets worked out. But I don't think this is like a malicious deal by the XFL. They saw a brand that looked cool and they wanted it for themselves. This is not what's going on here.
Yeah, it's Sue Bird and then Simone Manuel, Chloe Kim, and Alex Morgan. I just want to make sure we touch on all four of the female. But, Sue Bird, I think, is the highest profile of that. To round this out, any conversations you've had since the rebrand? Actually, I have two questions. Has this lawsuit, cease and desist, anything entered into any conversations? And you don't have to say names or anything, but if anyone that you've been talking to in the last, because this came out right after the announcement, and then obviously the official lawsuit came out this week.
I think there was expectancy, the possibility, not this particular brand per se, but anytime you release a new brand, there's always you expect the possibility that someone could come forward with anything you release, any one of these leagues, any of these entities. So that's always into consideration. You're mindful, respectful of it. We've seen a little bit of an alteration on the YouTube video there as you posted on social media. So I don't think the XFL is looking to be an enemy to anybody in the space. But you have to expect this. Whenever you put out a new brand, whenever you put out a trademark, there's always that possibility exists. Whether there's merit behind it or not, there's a good chance that whatever you put out there could very well be challenged. So I don't think they're surprised. I don't think they're dismissive. It just comes with the territory.
So I would say overwhelmingly either neutral or negative response, right, from the public about this rebrand, right? I mean, I don't see a lot of people really championing this. Have you had any conversations about that with anyone, about kind of the lukewarm nature of this pretty hard rebrand across the board?
No, the rebrand has been something that's been in place for a while. It's something that Dany Garcia and Dwayne Johnson and Redbird Capital wanted to do for a while. So they've been working on it for a long time. Like I said, they had a specific design firm working on it. So this has been in the works for quite some time now. And so, I haven't heard anything specific in terms of one way or the other, any kind of like negative or strong feedback one way or the other on the issue. And I don't know how people are responding out there. I think if there was like a blatant ripoff, like if you coming out with your own sneaker brand, it looks like the Nike logo. Like, oh, come on, how could you do that? How could you be so foolish? I think there would be a lot of public sentiment towards, okay, this company's just in big trouble here. They deserve whatever's coming their way. That's not really the sentiment here with this situation.
It's just interesting. Like this is the first real and I don't think we've had you on since we got the rebrand. I think we've obviously had you on a bunch before, but like this was the first thing that came out. Dany in her Sportico interview is like, we hate being secretive. We have all these wonderful ideas. We're busting at the seams to share all of them. And then this is like the first thing that comes out. We're just like,
We'll see what happens too when they release their new merchandise, when they release their team merchandise. I'm pretty sure there'll be a logo here and there I'm pretty sure there'll be. I mean, the league already saw that in 2020 with the Roughnecks, Renegades, everything else. So it's very possible that whatever they release for, let's say Orlando or San Antonio, that someone will go, hey, wait a minute, the Scorpions, come on, whatever. I'm just saying, I'm not saying
Scorpions confirmed to Las Vegas.
I'm not saying that. Or it won't be the Bored Apes, that's for sure. But I know, I see it. So anyhow, but so it's going to be a thing, it's not what you want if you're coming out with new brands, but it is what it is.
I don't see, and I think Van and I have vehemently disagreed on this with the respect that I guess the term carries in Texas. I don't see the XFL 3.0 having a Roughnecks team name. I don't know. And to me, that's always felt kind of weird. I mean, Dragons is kind of an outlier, but you got the Guardians, Vipers. Roughnecks always sounds too much like Rednecks to me. And I know it's the working man and it's like, it's the union, whatever there. It always felt, I don't see that continuing. That's just me.
We're going to see what happens here. They're putting their own stamp on it. They being Redbird Capital, Dwayne Johnson, Dany Garcia, that team there. So we'll see how many of the brands that we loved or back in 2020, how many of those return, and how many of them, the ones that do return, how many of them have a different twist. It's going to be interesting to see what the jerseys look like, what the logos look like, what the colors look like. So there's going to be like I've mentioned, reported for such a long time, there's going to be a lot of changes around the margins, and this is part of it. The rebrands, the names. As far as Roughnecks go, I love the logo, but I can see why a lot of people didn't. Maybe the name could be a little rough depending on where you stand on that. I got your opinion on it there. We'll see what happens. There was contention against that brand itself, obviously for the logo and everything. So these teams could come back with different names. We'll see. I don't know. I've been digging on that for the longest time. Obviously, the XFL is doing a good job of hiding their brands. They haven't, really, at least not in this country, trademark those brands. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see how many tweaks we get.
Over, under, so we got 8, right? And we're not going to hold you to this, but just at the top of your head, like, 7 of 8 returning, 4 of 8, 1 of 8. I mean, just sure. If you just your gut feeling.
Sure. Back in April, when I reported it before the coaches were announced, I reported the coaches and the cities. What I heard was three new cities: Orlando, San Antonio, Vegas. with New York, LA, and Tampa out of the mix. Now, we'll see, because back when I got that information, obviously accompanied with the coaches that I reported on, back when I got that information, the talks were at the time of potentially having a hub in Texas. Now, the league has shifted away from that possibility completely, and they're definitely looking to lock up venue deals for each one of their individual cities. That very well, this is why if you saw my reports, my tweets, whatever on these issues, it came with a caveat, because I wrote the situation is fluid, because now with venue deals, what could very well happen is, even if they have designs on, say, in Orlando, but they find a better deal in Miami or someplace else in Florida, you could have a franchise there. So I think these venue deals are key, like they always are, in deciding what these cities end up being, because the desire might be to be in Las Vegas, but will they get a favorable deal at, let's say, Allegiant Stadium? Will scheduling work out there? So how are you going to work that out? So that part is, I think the league even went in their press release and said in the coming months, when all of a sudden they started using the verbiage of venues and locations. So that's when you knew for sure they were moving away from, and although it seems like they're like kind of having their cake and eating it too, because the idea, at least at this point, from what I've heard, is that they're going to practice in Texas, stay in Texas, house the teams, the players, the coaches, everybody in Texas for the entire season, and then fly the teams out to their cities for their games. Now, I would prefer, so I'm not writing the checks, I would prefer that these teams set up shop in their local markets so you can connect with the communities and all that. But I mean, that's another whole ball of wax in terms of getting practice facilities, setting up infrastructure, having buildings for team headquarters, all that. So that's not easy either. So we'll see what the eventual setup ends up being. But it's going to be fascinating to see once these dots are all connected.
It's slightly terrifying to me that I don't think, maybe timeline wise, I think you can figure out stuff right now. I think we're fine for February. Just from like a thesis of a league that we've had, 2 years now to deal with this, that like we're still like, well, are we really in San Antonio? Like, are we really in Orlando? That is a little terrifying to me. I just think that you should know where your bread and butter is going to be in the markets that you want to be at and target that. I mean, I didn't like the USFL's rationale of like, well, the USFL was in, wherever, Houston back in the 80s. We felt like going there. I mean, I just think XFL should have a little bit more targeted of like, let's go to Ohio. Demos were strong there when we played before. Let's go back to New York. Or not like, we weren't going to be in New York, but now we're with Disney and they want us to be in New York potentially. Like it's weird to me that like we're still like fidoodling with this and we don't have like a strong map for where we want to be.
It's definitely been a methodical approach, and that's like a lot of what. There's no doubt about it, but that's a lot of what Redbird does with these things. It's like they don't. This is a different investment for Redbird Capital than, say, they just purchased, Jerry Cardinal just purchased AC Milan. They've got Liverpool interest and connections with Fenway Sports Group and the Yankees and everything else. By now, everyone should know, if they haven't done the research on all these different things that Redbird's involved with. But the Spring Pro Football League, their own Spring Pro Football League, they fully realize what it's going to take financially to get it up and running, what their vision is. And they've been working on this for a while. The league did get a little bit, 2021 was going to be wiped out regardless because of COVID. You're not going to have these type of leagues. I mean, you can attempt to have this type of league with no attendance, but that's not what they're looking for, right? They want to connect with communities and cities and markets and all that. They want attendance. And so that's kind of the story there. But we knew 2021 was going to be out of the mix there. And then there was a little bit of a sidetrack with the whole CFL business. So we've kind of landed in an interesting spot here. But I think the markets they're considering, the markets that I've mentioned, that I've reported on, there are plans for each one of those. There are specific reasons why each one of them have been chosen. This isn't like a fly-by-night, hey, why don't we try Austin? Hey, Portland would be pretty cool. That's not, that's probably how I would pick things, but let's go to Columbus. There's a lot of thought and thought process and planning and strategy involved when you're making these types of decisions. It's a key one. The 8 markets they choose, very important. The stadiums, the venue deals they make, extremely important. So it's going to be interesting where they land. Part of me is wishful thinking, hoping that someone gets in my ear and says, hey, Mike, they're coming back to New York. Disney wants it. It's a big market. I'm dying to hear that because I would really selfishly, because I'm a Northeast guy, I'd love to see New York back. But whatever 8 cities they end up choosing, I'm good. I fully realize that they're doing it for the betterment of the league and for what they feel is the best decision financially moving forward. So it's part of the drill, I guess.
I think at some point you can be a little, I'm very OCD. Like I've designed many logos in my life with the help of, Biko that does all the marketing stuff for us. I just think you can get too in the weeds sometimes. And I feel like, this is episode, I think 95. Like if you go back to episode 1 of this show, I think Paul and I cracked the code for like, keep it in New York, move it to Red Bull, keep it in LA, move it to wherever the soccer team is there. Let's get out of Tampa. Like, I think we have this all wrapped up about, 94 weeks ago. So I just I don't know. I don't want to get too caught up on that. I want to talk and I want to get your reactions. We had our big Randy Caracker, right? The St. Louis guy. I think I listened to how he said his name and then what I was talking about earlier on the show, but we had the big June 1 promise this week, right? Wednesday, we were going to get cities and the Battlehawks and we were returning and all of that. I noticed you were, very silent in terms of corroborating any of that, right? Which is always interesting. Randy came out. I don't like big time people like that getting a lot of clout when they're reporting the alt stuff that it really doesn't feel like Randy knows a lot about. I mean, I know he's in St. Louis. I've talked to some of the other St. Louis guys and they're like, well, Randy's not really, he talks the bigger game, maybe that he's involved in what he is. But Randy said June 1st, we're going to come out. June 1st came and went. I was very upset on social media. What was your reactions to all of basically the wet fart that was the Wednesday news break?
What's interesting with Randy is I reached out to him. We communicated a little bit when he came out with the story, when he went on the air and before he went on the air, when he actually tweeted out that June 1st would be the date that the Battlehawks are coming back and all that. And I'm not surprised by the Battlehawks coming back. I mean, that's something I've reported for the longest time. But, Randy and I traded some information together and I told him what I knew and all that. And then he went on the air and he had some information there that he came up with, Anthony Becht and all that. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm going to assume, I can't speak for Randy, I'm going to assume that someone at the Dome told him that they've reserved dates. And I'm going to assume that someone may have mentioned the possibility of a June 1st announcement. I'm going to assume. Now, I haven't heard anything, a specific date yet. I have been told earlier today that the announcements are coming this month in terms of cities. We're going to hear announcement as well in terms of directors of player personnel and coordinators for each team. You would figure that the DPP, the director of player personnel for each individual team, and maybe the coordinators as well, would be announced before the showcases come. We're recording this on a Thursday night. This will air on Friday, but we're 2 weeks away from the XFL having their first showcase. And they're actually having 2 showcases within a 3-day span. And all the showcases have actually sold out, as you know, Reed. So, and it's pretty interesting because from what I've heard in terms of the registration and all that, 4 of the 6 showcases are going to have over 200 players each. This is information directly from the league. And 2 of them are going to have a slightly less than that, fewer players than that. That would be Hawaii, and the other HBCU focused showcase there in Jackson. So there's going to be quite a few players there. They're close to 1,000 in that neighborhood that are going to be trying out for the league. So there, you would figure, as far as the cities go, as far as these big announcements go, as far as the personnel, the key guys, directors of player personnel, for some people that's a boring thing, but that's pretty important in terms of player evaluations for each team, like how good these teams are going to be, having the right people judging the talent. So anyhow, but that would be good timing. That first one in Maryland?
DC is going to be on June 17th. I looked at it. Then Florida is going to be on June 19th, and then the Hawaii one on the 25th. It's weird how they lay them out on the website where we have all the June ones and then all the July ones. But yeah, the 17th, 19th, and 25th of June.
Yeah, so we got 2 weeks until that. So, I would this month, from like what I've been told, this month we're definitely going to get announcements. So, what we get specifically, you would figure if we're getting cities, we're going to get cities with stadiums. Now, whether or not we get team names as well, that's another story. How long it takes before we find out what the uniforms look like, when XFL shop opens up, all that, who knows? So there's a lot of ambiguity with a lot of this stuff, like, trying to figure out where everything is headed.
Yeah, I mean, you can like print this stuff out, like give us just the XFL, like just, even if you don't want to say, okay, the Dragons, or whatever, like give us the cities. I mean, we had the cities in the XFL for a year before. I mean, it was like December and then August, we got the team names. I mean, I remember watching it here and because we thought maybe it was like the Surge and then it was the Dragons. But like, I think like just telling us where the cities are, I think would quell 98% of like the people like on the internet.
I know it's hard to be patient and it's hard to preach patience to the XFL crowd because let's face it, they've been waiting since 2020, right? So I get that part of it, but eventually they got no choice but to reveal all these things. I remember the hysteria during the lead up to XFL 2020, how long it took for them to reveal their team names, how people were going nuts about that, how long it took for them to come out with the full uniforms and everything else. So it's, it's pretty crazy. So, but we're going to get all this stuff is coming. They got no choice but to play in cities. They got no choice but to play in stadiums. They got no choice but to have coaching staffs. They have no choice but to have a draft and draft players. We now know what stations are going to be on. We'll wait to see how the schedule works itself out. ABC, ESPN, everything else. But the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. They're just coming together slower than people would want, but you're going to get it. A month from now, we'll be sitting here where, and 2 months from now, 3 months from now, we're going to be sitting here talking about, I don't know if the San Antonio should have had that red color. It looks ridiculous on the helmet. So this will long be forgotten, but it's, it's hard to be patient. Maybe it's that, what'd you say you have OCDC, whatever. Yeah. So whatever your ailment is. So, but
I remember when they revealed the uniforms, I was in Vegas. I was filming an event for my sister-in-law, and I was in the Ferris wheel, like the high roller, and I should have been working harder, but I was on my phone refreshing, and then I was at McLaren Airport, which I think since has been renamed. I think it has a different name now. But I was listening to Mark's. He had done the live stream, listening to his, because I wasn't involved in all this back then. But I vividly remember.
Do you remember read on social media how the XFL teased their logos? So what they did was they showed a little portion of each logo, like the dragon there. You would see like a little green part in the middle. Yeah. And then so it's like a little portion. So people were trying to figure it out for like a week. They're sitting there going, is that a tail? Is that a wing? Is that a horn? So, so it was pretty funny how that worked out. It ended up being fun, like when they were eventually revealed and all that. But it was like frustration of that. I don't know how you would figure, like, the June 1st thing, right? Just going back to that for a second. If the XFLs were revealing their cities, you would figure they would do it in some sort of grand fashion, that it wouldn't just be some plain ass tweet or, just a quick little notice. Because let's face it, their big announcements, their TV deal came at the upfronts, right? With Disney there. Their coaching announcement that came on ESPN, on Get Up, and they were on ESPN Sports Center all day. So you would figure if they're going to announce their cities and then uniforms and everything else, that it's going to be done in a I wouldn't say a spectacular fashion, but something that's a little more spectacular than just a plain old tweet.
Well, and also, and Max, our great friend Max was quick to point out, Jerry Cardinale is off in Milan buying the soccer team. Like, they're probably not going to do the announcement, when like one of the major, share stakeholders in all this. Just to finalize the conversation on Randy. Because I was, like I said, I get upset when these mainstream guys, because I had tweeted at him that, because of his actions and because everyone got so upset that the Battlehawks should be relegated that should be an expansion team now, right? Like, you don't get to be part of the 8 now. You have to wait till 2025. The Battlehawks have to do that. Everyone tweeted and don't do all that stuff. But I did think it was funny that Randy wrote me back and he's like, he wrote on Twitter, I asked, I just sent him a message asking for the time and like, they never got back to me. I go, Well, because you probably weren't supposed to say anything about the first. Like, if you told me something and I went and blabbed on the podcast about it, and then I messaged you for clarification, you probably wouldn't tell me anything else because I probably wasn't supposed to say it in the first place. I'm like, Randy, like, that doesn't surprise me at all that they wouldn't write back to you. Like, you probably were supposed to do
I annoy people like crazy, like reaching out when the possibility of a June 1st announcement came out. There was several people, maybe 15, that I contacted, at least that I contacted, trying to find out if there's any merit to that, either confirm or deny. Is there any merit to that? And from what I got from the people that did speak to me, was that June 1st is not the date. So when I was told June 1st is not the date, they're not planning any reveal on June 1st. I very much doubt that's, I don't know. Like I said, Randy probably got information from someone related to the Dome that told him that June 1st would be the date they announce it. So I'm going to assume that. But, that doesn't mean that June 1st is going to be going to actually be the date. So, and it wasn't, obviously. And I very much doubt that it was done out of spite. Oh, man, we were going to do it on June 1st.
No,
but this St. Louis guy went in the air. Screw that. June 8th it is, or whatever. So.
No, I don't. I agree with that also. I just don't think, like, if you leak something that maybe you're not supposed to leak because you want to, like I said, I mean, Randy came across wanting to be really cool. I know this information. You don't. I'm going to blab about it on my show. And then he got caught with his pants down. And then it's like, well, they won't tell me anything else. It's like, well, that doesn't surprise me. We'll get to USFL stuff here. Rounding out, we're getting to the point now where basically we're confirming things that you've come out with before, right? You had Anthony Beck to St. Louis. That came out this week. Aaron Wilson, right? NFL kind of insider. And then Bob Stoops to Dallas, right? So we kind of have those locked up. First off, do you have any comments on either of those kind of more confirmations of kind of things that we've known?
Yeah, it's Anthony Beck's an interesting one because he has connections to Florida and to New York, if there was presumably a tri-state area team for the XFL. But I think St. Louis makes sense for him, and I think that's one of the plum jobs. I know you're trashing St. Louis a little bit because of frustration with everything that just took place, but that is a great job. The St. Louis job, that's a hot market. They're going to embrace that. That's a great job to have. Even better if you win, obviously. So, and I think Anthony Beck, his son, Rocco Beck, who's a top prospect quarterback, plays at Iowa State, which isn't too far away from. So that's an ideal kind of setup for him if he's in fact in St. Louis during the season. We'll see. Besides the games, obviously. Stoops, obvious to anyone where he would be. When I reported that he was coming back, people were like, wow, that was the shocker. Out of all the XFL head coaches, he's coming back. He was one of the top paid coaches in 2020. A lot of people just assumed that he's working for Fox. He's not going to be interested in doing it again. Well, here he is. Wade Phillips in Houston. San Antonio is an interesting situation because I've heard different things. I've heard Reggie Barlow, which has been out there and reported, and I've also heard Hines Ward. So lately I've been hearing more Barlow. But like I've mentioned back in April, before the coaches were announced by the XFL on ESPN, the situation is fluid here. I've heard Rod Woodson with Las Vegas. That's a fascinating one to me. Hines Ward, presumably in D.C. We'll see about D.C. That's another thing as far as venue deals, Audi Field, all that. That's very expensive. The upkeep for that field. There's a lot of layers to this thing. Mm-hmm. So there's no question. Jim Haslett in Seattle. Interesting one there. And then, I've heard some coaches, so I've reported some of these, but I got a list here of a few guys I've heard. So Dwayne Taylor, one of the top offensive coordinators in the FCS, who's currently at Alabama and A&M. I've heard that he's going to be joining the XFL. The problem I have, again, is I don't know which team he's going to be on. Now, some people I've spoken to have linked him to Anthony Beck in St. Louis. That'd be interesting. Dwayne Taylor actually coached in the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, which is a game that Anthony Beck and Rod Woodson and others coached. I've heard about Mark Lillibridge, as people know him as Bridge in football circles, as the a de facto GM, I guess, director of player personnel in St. Louis. Now, whether or not he ends up in St. Louis, we'll see, but he has ties to that area. So he's a respected name in the football circles. The Seattle situation is fascinating. And I think with Jim Haslett as the head coach, I've heard of Randy Mueller, who was the Houston Roughnecks director of player personnel, was also with the Salt Lake Stallions. I've heard of Randy Mueller with Jim Haslett. Anybody who's followed their two careers, it's fascinating because back in 2000, Jim Haslett was the NFL head coach of the year with the New Orleans Saints. The executive of the year was Randy Mueller. They were together there. Another person I've heard connected to that situation, we all heard, is June Jones. He let that cat come out of the bag. He'll be the offensive coordinator there with Jim Haslett in Seattle. The defensive coordinator is Ron Zook. Now, some people may be familiar with that name, so others not. He's coached in the NFL ranks with Jim Haslett in New Orleans, obviously in the college ranks. So it sounds like Haslett's got a pretty strong staff there, and he's got experience, Haslett, in alternative leagues. So that Seattle team could be pretty lethal there. That's a pretty good group there with Randy Mueller and all that. I've heard of Joey Clinkscales as the director of player personnel with Rod Woodson in Las Vegas. They both have ties to the Raiders. They work together with the Raiders. Clinkscales was the LA Wildcats GM, director of player personnel. So again, like Randy Mueller, this is important in these leagues to actually have people in those positions that have experience in spring pro football and were successful. We saw the Houston Roughnecks were undefeated. We saw the LA Wildcats were one of the hottest teams in the XFL. They had a very talented roster. So that's a couple of the names I've heard there. Now, some interesting other coaches too. This is the CFL guys who listen to the show will know one of these names. I've heard of Jamie Elizondo as the offensive coordinator for Hines Ward. That's an interesting pairing there. Jamie Elizondo was, obviously the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Vipers, and he just finished, a miserable season to CFL. Unfortunately, Jamie Elizondo was considered one of the best offensive minds in Canada. Last year really didn't work out for him too well with Edmonton with the newly rebranded Elks. Jim Herman, I've heard, is defensive coordinator with Hines Ward. That's a name that not too many people know, but if he won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants, he was the defensive coordinator for the New York Guardians in the XFL. He's kind of like a hired gun. Anytime you wanted to beat the New England Patriots and Tom Brady, they went to Jim Herman. The Steelers hired him so he could come in and they could beat the Patriots. Obviously, the Giants beat the Patriots on two different occasions. So that's a very good name there. So those are some of the names that I've heard. There are other names that I've heard that I can't reveal out of confidence, about maybe 6 or 7 others. But you can see kind of like where the league is going. And these are important hires. The earlier you get these staffs together. Now, another thing that I've heard, just information out there, a lot of the assistants, coordinators, director of player personnel, they're probably going to get started fairly soon. Meaning being on payroll, all that. I've heard the assistant staffs may not start until September. I mentioned Dwayne Taylor earlier. From what I heard, he's going to be staying at Alabama A&M to finish out the 2022 season, and that he's going to join the XFL after that completes. So since mini camps, training camps are not starting till presumably December and January, you can pull that off since the college season will end most likely in that November, December range. So there might be an exception there. So it's interesting to see which team Taylor ends up with. Like I mentioned, the possibility of him joining St. Louis. So these are some of the announcements that are coming our way. They're not as sexy as the cities. That's what we want to know, right? So, but with the showcases coming up, these guys are all important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got to get, and I mean, it's going to be, like you said, the showcases before maybe weren't as paramount, right? Maybe it was more of like a PR, right, to kind of do the showcases. But, the XFL needs to get this talent from anywhere, right? Doing the Hawaii one, doing the HBCU one. When you talk about director of player personnel, mirroring, so that's going to be the president, right?
Like the GM, like the general manager of a team that's responsible for, like a GM with drafting players. I mean, it'll be a collaborative effort. Obviously, a head coach will have a lot of say. Coaching staff will have a lot of say. But the director of player personnel is like the de facto boss. Now, in the old XFL, the head coaches were listed as a GM as well. Yeah. But all those guys leaned on their directors of player personnel. Trey Brown, who's moving up the Bengals organization, was very good with the St. Louis Battlehawks back in the XFL. He's moved on to the NFL, back into the NFL, and he's doing a very good job there. He just got another promotion. So obviously Bengals doing pretty well. They won the AFC Championship last year. So that's kind of the story there. But yeah, these guys are these positions are extremely important. It's like it's not the top dog, it's the right-hand man, it's the person you're working with together. Say, this is the running backs that I'm interested in, or players that I'm interested in. So that's going to be for a football geek like me, that's the fun side. The talent aspect is an interesting argument. You've had some great shows on recently, Eric Galco and many others. You've had this discussion with people. It's going to be, and I've seen some of the, although I haven't engaged, some of the arguments that go on social media, people arguing that the XFL is not going to have enough talent themselves, that they're going to, I just find that fascinating, that whole aspect of it. So like, there's like a rhetorical question, right? But, and you can answer here. So you're supposed to ask me the questions, but like some of the best XFL players in 2020, they have something in common. We're talking about PJ Walker, Donald Parham, Kenny Robinson, Cam Phillips, Storm Norton. What do they all have in common? None of them played in the AAF. And the reason for that is they were all in the NFL when the AAF was ongoing. Another factor to this, so the reason why I'm bringing that up is because a lot of people are saying, where's the XFL going to get their talent from? The USFL, here's the assumption here, and I don't want to be derogatory towards the USFL. The assumption is that the USFL got the best of what's left, right? So like, where's the XFL going to get talent? Well, I'm not trying to be detrimental because I love a lot of the players in USFL. I've enjoyed the league immensely, but there are a lot of players in the USFL currently that have been out of the NFL loop for 2 to 3 years. A lot of them played in the AAF in 2019 and haven't been able to latch on an NFL team, not even getting a camp. A lot of them played in the XFL in 2020, and unfortunately, for whatever crazy reason, talented guys like Darius Victor have been out of work for 2 years. He hasn't even gotten an NFL camp invite. When you watch him play in the USFL, you're like, how the hell is that happening? But there he is. So there are a lot of guys in the USFL right now that deserve the opportunity to play pro ball, but they haven't been in the NFL loop for 2 to 3 years, that kind of deal. So when someone asks, where's the XFL going to get their talent pool from? You just need to look back to 2020, because in 2020, it helped when the AAF went out of business. But what people are forgetting, two parts of it, the AAF's best players ended up in the NFL, so the XFL couldn't get them. The Garrett Gilberts, the Ernest Johnsons, John Wolfords, Young Hokus, etc. And the other part of that was the XFL's best players were on NFL rosters. So where the XFL's, they're not going to get all 700 of the players that NFL teams release in September that don't end up on practice squads. I'm taking into account the expanded practice squads. They're not going to get all those players. But of the 700 that end up outside of the NFL, in a league that's going to have 70-player rosters, at least to start out with in training camp and the regular season, 560 players, there's going to be a good number of players in the XFL in 2023 that are right now on NFL rosters. So I think that's something that's not being considered when people talk about this equation, because as I mentioned, all the XFL's top players, the Jordan Teamos, all those guys, they were on NFL rosters when the XFL was still like naming their teams and doing their uniforms and all that stuff. So that's going to be a big part of it. The XFL's, Doug Whaley, Mark Ross, Russ Giglio, they've got a big task in front of them. That entire football ops department, they've got a big task in front of them. Now, the league's supposed to pay, from what I've heard, $65K on average per player. They're going to have larger rosters. Their quarterback's going to be paid higher. So they're going to have to do some heavy recruiting, which they've been doing already. And so they're going to have to prove themselves in the marketplace. But definitely the general consensus amongst people that I talk to is they don't believe there's enough talent for one league. So how can there be enough talent for two leagues? But I think I just described an alternative viewpoint on all that.
You say 65K, presumably
average.
Average. I heard that right.
6,500 per week. Like right now in the USFL, it's 4,500 per week. That's what I've heard. Now could be more than that. That's just what I've heard. Could be more than that. And then that average could go up depending on how much you pay your quarterbacks. But from what I've heard, they're going to pay more. And that's what they've been telling agents too. In the pitch meetings that they've been having with agents that currently have NFL players, some that have USFL players too. So so that's just kind of the story there. So this war for talent, because mind you, on the flip side of things, the USFL can also get involved in trying to go after players that are cut by NFL teams. But, the leagues that pay more, this is great for players, by the way. The leagues that pay more are going to get the best players. So that's just kind of how it works.
I mean, look, right, no better example right now than WWE and AEW, right? Having a strong number two that is able to offer, exorbitant in some cases with AEW guys, but to be able to offer, competitive contracts. Presumably, if they're in Texas, housed in the bubble like that, maybe won't have to pay for board either. I mean, we're just making assumptions, but of course.
Well, they're also told agents that they're going to pay housing for not like the USFL players are paying half or whatever it is. Yeah, subsidized. So the XFL is also told that their players are going to have full coverage. The players are going to be taken care of. Players on injured reserve are going to be paid. Obviously going to have much larger rosters, more jobs, more opportunities, and that they're going to take care of housing and feed, travel, of course, and all that other stuff. So
yeah, you got to book your own. We're going to house you in Texas, but you got to book your own flight. You got to fly, get your own flight.
Yeah, they're not doing all that. So the entire league, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like I said, a lot of this is fluid, but from what I've heard and from what a lot of people have heard, that not just myself, that they're going to be housed completely in Texas, the entire operation in terms of the coaches, everybody. So we'll see.
Last question. We got to get to USFL stuff here. Get your shot ready. So director of player personnel, head coach, are we still going to have presidents? Do we need that for all house in Texas year one?
That's a terrific question. I don't think we're going to have presidents right out the gate in year one. I don't think we're going to have fully staffed, maybe. But I would assume we're not going to have fully staffed marketing teams. There could be some partnership. Yeah, there could be marketing. There could be also, back in the, I believe it was Elevate, right? I'm trying to hit the memory bank here.
Yep.
I think the XFL had a relationship with Elevate. So there could be something going on that front in terms of selling tickets and all that in the individual markets, whatever relationships through Ticketmaster, all that. And I know the XFL's had a huge hire recently on that front in terms of connecting with markets and the business aspects with that. So it's going to be fascinating to follow all this. It's very interesting.
I just hope like this, we're going to move to USFL stuff here. The one size fits all social media stuff, like especially when you're in the hub, if you're in the modified hub with the XFL, like that's not going to work, right? I mean, and I understand USFL is on we're shoestring budget and all this, but like the same tweet with every single team, giddy up, get your tickets today, free beach towels, and then the Maulers are tweeting in, whatever. Like, if you're gonna, that's an easy way to hire a couple. Hire some 18-year-old kid out of college or 20.
I'm with you. One of the best aspects about XFL in 2020 was their social media presence.
Oh, of course.
And if the XFL is going to talk about connectivity, that's a big thing in today's day and age, just connecting with the individual fan bases. And the NFL has gotten, probably following some of the lead of the XFL. I mean, one of their teams, Washington's, their entire social media teams, practically the XFL people. But we've seen the NFL teams have been doing a much better job with social media, and they're connecting. The Chargers are doing a tremendous job. Their entire social media team, they're tremendous.
The anime thing, that was the schedule release was the cool. And they did that. They did it all in house because I'm like, they hired. They clearly paid $1 million to have some anime firm in Japan. No, like they did that all in house. Incredible.
And you need that. And I think in order for the XFL to connect with people in St. Louis, to connect with people, I think they're going to have to ramp up. It's early stages social media for them. They're not, once they get all these teams situated and all that, they're going to need to have social media departments for each group. I don't know if it's the 18-year-olds that you mentioned, but you want to have talented people working for you. You want rock stars. You want people who are going to do a great job, not 5 a.m. news releases or pinning a tweet to sell tickets and not doing anything else. I mean, so you see that pinned on a lot of I hate to bring it up, but on a lot of the USFL teams, the pinned tweet, once you go on their social media, it's right there, buy tickets. I know they're not interested in attendance, but that's their top priority tweet on all their social media. So you need to be more active. You need to connect with the base. And I think the XFL's plans are to connect, to keep the fans connected to the league year round and not just when they're in the stadium. So that's a big factor.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to save the money, right? We're not going to house. You don't got to lease all this stuff. $65,000 a year, right? Times 8 people, $500,000, right? Like, very easy price to pay if we're saving tens of millions of dollars, right, on housing and in dealing with all of that stuff and insurance and all the different like. $500,000, hire 8 social media guys or girls, 1 for each team. Like, I just can't stand this. I think it's such a. such a miss from the USFL too. Like I said, if you're not going to be in the markets, at least trying to be able to encourage people that way is the way to do it. All right, USFL stuff. You have your shot ready. I've opened my second shiner. Do you have
here we go. All right, yeah, it looks like you've been drinking already. Okay, so for the purposes of this occasion, this is joining the mix. A logo that'll probably be extinct very shortly, or if it isn't already. Yeah. So that, and I got the whiskey here. So here we are. I'm sure this will be posted all over social media.
So there we go. We got past all the confidential XFL stuff. So USFL ratings, right? You talk to everyone. You email Nielsen. You talk with the Fox Sports people. You talk with all these different people. Like USFL ratings, if they are higher than what was even the lowest expectations, don't have to drink. If they were lower than even the lowest expectations, take a shot, please.
All right.
What do you make of? I mean, we had you saw the big blow up yesterday, which was funny. Like, Seth and I, and I got a lot of like mom and dad are fighting, and like Seth and I talk every day online. Like, there's really like not. I sent him the cease and desist, whatever, trademark tonight from the Together people. But like, what do you make of all of this? With you write your articles, you try to be very diplomatic, but I want to hear Mike Mitchell's real thoughts on the USFL ratings.
Sure. It's tough because there's a lot of different ways to look at it, right? So I from what I know what the public spin is. I know what the private spin is. So privately, Fox was hoping that the ratings would be better than they are. They're hoping for better numbers on cable and better numbers on network. It's not to say they didn't expect that there would be some issues. Now, someone I spoke to earlier today that's close to the situation told me that they felt that there was a few different reasons why the ratings aren't as high as they expected them to be. One of them is spring league fatigue. That's a term that I've heard a lot of in the last few weeks, and that's something that I heard earlier today in a conversation. The feeling is, and this is a big part of what the USFL is banking on, right? So if you are bullish about the USFL's chances moving forward, is that because of what happened with the AAF, how they failed in spectacular fashion, unfortunately, because of what happened with the XFL because of COVID, that the public has no faith whatsoever in these leagues. So a lot of the mainstream football fans have not invested their time or given the USFL a fair shake because they figured they would be gone by now, to be honest, just because of it's fair or unfair. That's been the case there. And so the executive I spoke to was telling me that they felt that that's part of the reason why the ratings haven't been as high, because a lot of people are not giving the USFL a fair shake because of what happened with the other leagues. So the big thing for the USFL, and what from the conversations I've had, what they feel is that getting to year 2, and we're going to see once they complete their season. I'm looking forward to the championship game and all that. Should be fun. Canton, Ohio, all that. Once they complete this season, they're going to be popping champagne and celebrating. And we'll see that all over social media, all over the place. They're the spring league that finished, all that. Even though technically Fox has been in bed with Brian Woods since 2020. So even though it was a haphazard season in 2020, they finished that year and Brian Scott was the MVP. And then a year ago in the spring, there was a spring pro football league that actually finished the season called the Spring League. And so this technically is Fox's 3rd year of finishing a league. Their relationship with Spring League, Spring Professional League. Obviously the USFL, this is the new iteration, so that them completing this. But I digress back to the original point. The USFL is hoping that by getting to year 2, that people will give them a more fair chance when they come around in 2023, that people will see that this league is here to stay and they will fully commit to it, because there were doubts and uncertainty about the league sticking around because others, quite frankly, did not. So, and then, of course, there's the second part of this, the ratings, right? Which is also ties into this. So obviously, more people give the league a chance, you get more viewers that way. But then the big part of it is actually going into markets. So they think they're going to pick up viewers because people are going to see that this league has staying power. and then they think they'll pick up viewers when they actually go into market. Those are two fair arguments. Those are possibilities. If they're actually in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, I don't know if anybody wants the Maulers at this point, but we'll see. Maybe they get a new coach. They should. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But if New Jersey, if the Generals are in New Jersey, if all these teams, are in markets, that's a factor, because now you actually have, this is a big part of the USFL kind of should know this. You're going to actually have press cover the teams and you're going to be giving them information so they can cover your team better. And that's your promotional tool. They're the press that covers your teams. So you have beat reporters in New Jersey, in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, in all these markets that cover your team. They help you sell tickets because they're putting you, nowadays, not too many people are getting newspapers, but they're putting you in the papers. They're putting you in the online publications, all that. So once you go into markets, that picks up. So that should, in theory, by default, help your ratings go up because you're actually getting promoted in individual markets. So that'll make people attach themselves more, because right now it's kind of strange, to watch the Pittsburgh Maulers play in Birmingham, in front of like 38 people, if that. So there's no really, you don't feel any attachment to the league. But if they're playing in your neck of the woods, you're definitely going to feel attachment. So those two things will play into the USFL's favor. The ratings have been, I won't say if you're comparing, it depends where, it depends how you compare it, right? Because a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, when the NBC cut off the USFL, they did a decent number, even though some publications out there like XFL Newsroom ran with the wrong ratings information after they took it from another site.
Watch your mouth.
Yeah, so anyway, it is what it is. But they had a decent number, 1.1 million, I believe it was. But they got, unfortunately, this would have never happened to the NFL. They were cut off so Saturday Night Live could get on time. I guarantee you if the NFL was on, Lorne Michaels would have kept it on, because the NFL's lead is like 20, 30 million people, whatever the number is, something ridiculous like that. So anyhow, the USFL got cut off. They did 1.1 million viewers. That's good. A year prior, the NHL was in the same time slot and did 2.3 million viewers. So it depends where you're comparing these things. So if NBC is looking at that saying, well, we had the NHL in the same time slot, they did 2.3 million viewers. And we've got the USFL in this time slot, they did 1.1. Now, there's a lot of different factors to this. It's not black and white. It's, there's a lot of shades of gray in terms of how much are they paying for rights. Right now, the USFL is charging less for ad rates, but they've cut out the middleman so they can make some money off of that. That's great. They're not making any money off of attendance. And they've cut down costs. Their payroll, roughly for players is like maybe $15 million, maybe $17 million, in that range. I don't know how much they're spending in terms of coaching staff, training staff, all that. I'm sure that factors in as well. There's no travel costs. So the costs are down. We knew this, that they were going to be able to complete this season. They just completed the spring league in 2021. If you're not spending that much money, you're going to be all right. They weren't paying players back then, but at least not everybody. There might have been a few here and there. Anyway, but I think the way we're looking at this with the USFL is if they can get into markets, that's the end game goal. Is Fox willing? And God bless them if they are. I'm happy. The reason why Fox and Disney are back in the spring pro football game is because of the success they had with the XFL in 2020. That's why they're here. Because if the XFL, even though it ended after 5 weeks, if it was a train wreck, Fox would have said, screw this, I'm not getting involved in any kind of spring league. This is ridiculous. It's got no chance. It has no viability, no staying power. Disney wouldn't be back at the table. So right now, live sports rule. Ratings are down completely all across the board. And live sports content is where it's at, because it's so if you present a product that delivers decent viewership every week, you can have a place in there. Fox has designs on this league, their league, being more successful than it is. And they feel if they get to year 2 and if they get to the point where they can sell off these franchises, that it's going to be a successful model, something that can last. So we'll see. I'm glad that Fox and Disney are in the game, that they're doing this. It's tremendous for players, tremendous for coaches, tremendous for football fans. It's going to be fun to watch this transpire, see how everything shakes out.
So I got a bunch of comments here about all this. So, first off, the idea that, okay, we're going to go into markets and then we're going to they don't allow people to cover teams outside of Birmingham right now. I mean, they could. Like, if you're a Birmingham local reporter, like, you can only cover. You can only go to Birmingham. Like, to me, they're so weird and secretive. Like, I don't buy this spring league fatigue because they got a good rating the first week. They got a good rating the second week. They've got a bad rating week 7. Like, I think people tuned in and saw it, right? I think gameplay wasn't where it should have been because of lack of training camp. And I think now you're getting diminished on that. I mean, I think they got enough people to sample it, right? Like,
sure.
You know, if I did my first podcast and I got 1 million views, you know, and then like the next podcast I do, I got 1,000, you know, it's like, okay, well, people tuned in, you know, and then you get some back. Like, to me, I see a lot of like Reed hates the USFL or like Reed hates the hub or Reed, like, my biggest thing, I want this to succeed. Like you said, you know, USFL is not a hot product right now. You know, podcast views are down. Stefan's podcast views are down. Like, everyone's USFL. Like, I look at all the different, like, USFL network. I look at everyone's stuff. Everyone's views are down. It's not a sexy product. I want USFL to be as hot of a product as it can be because that encourages more people to watch my show. Because, like, I have Mark Drumheller on this week, does Yahoo Sports, right? Betting analyst. He's on the show as well here. Like, you know, I talked to them. How's your traction for Yahoo? You know, you run Yahoo Sports. How's your traction for USFL stuff? It's down. I talked to Ian Hurditz, you know, the PFF, you know, lead fantasy podcast. Like, how are your USFL views? They're down. Like, this is what people tell me, right? And it's because it's like they saw the XFL's homework and said, oh, you know, can I borrow your homework? Sure, like, switch it up a little bit. They write that saying so people don't think that we're copying it. And, you know, they simply think that, like, putting football on the field is enough. And I say this in the private chats all the time. It's the bare minimum amount of effort every single day. We have one PR person. We send out the roster transactions when we feel like it. We send out the email for the games when we feel like it. We send out press releases when we feel like it. We didn't even send out a press release that the playoff tickets were going on sale. There was no press release. Like, these are things that, like, people know this, right? You know, NBC doesn't fly the drone cam because it's not cost prohibitive. That, you know, they don't want to save money. Like, everything about this, and that's what and I've said before on here, it's these unforced errors of, like, it's already a hard enough battle for this. I do not hate the USFL. I absolutely hate the way that they're operating all of this, and I don't like them to be rewarded by doing, like I said, the bare minimum effort when doing a little bit better is really not that hard for a company the size of Fox Sports. This is not, and I'll give the same thing to Redbird. We've been critical about it on their interview here. I've been critical about it with Kevin Seifert today, but, like, I'm tired of this, like, Twitter online arguing, protecting, like, Fox Sports, like one of the largest, like the largest broadcaster of NFL games in the world. They're like, well, no, like, you need to cut them some slack. It's like, no, you need to cut us some slack. Like, I'm the one that's paying $3,000 to fly to Birmingham to do live shows for this kickoff. Like, let's cut us some slack. Like, I'm tired of giving these guys a pass when doing a little bit better is really not that hard.
Yeah, it's you're hurting yourself if you don't have transparency. I mean, who cares about, I mean, you should care about all these passionate sites and podcasts that are willing to cover your league and, you know, like myself, write tons of articles and yourself interview people and all that. You should care about that. But, okay, let's take anybody who's covering the league or writing articles about it out of the mix, right? What you should have is, number one, is transparency. Give information about your players, your news, your injuries, because that's how you drum up interest in your teams. You need to be more active on social media, providing information to the media and to, let's put it this way, right? For them to understand, which they should understand this. The fans are the consumers, right? So, like, if you want to drum up interest in fantasy and in gambling, which is how you get people to watch your games, you have to be transparent with your information. I know as an NFL fan, myself, a huge fantasy football fan. I'm not a gambling guy. Fantasy football is one of the huge reasons I have such great knowledge of every team's roster and why I'm so obsessed with watching any NFL game that's out there, because I'll have Amon-Ra St. Brown on a roster, and I can't wait to see if he gets 6 catches because I need to win. So, I mean, so that stuff is, and it's not just game day, by the way. It's during the week. You'll go and look at the Lions injury report and see, did Amon-Ra St. Brown practice today? Is Jared Goff going to play? Oh, great. He's not. Or maybe great if he is playing. I'm going to start the Bears defense this week. So, that kind of deal. And I'm not alone with this. Fantasy football players in the NFL do this every week. And it's how you get knowledge of the players on each roster. This information is pretty much free to give out. It doesn't take that much effort. 5:11 in the morning, DeAndre Johnson is returning. That should be big news. I've gotten some good traffic on that article I wrote about him, and that's great to see. But you shouldn't be releasing that piece of information. He's returning to your lineup. He's one of your star players. 5 o'clock in the morning. Really, that's all you got. A little blurb. So I mean, that's kind of transparency would help. It doesn't take much to do that. That's how you rope in gamblers and fantasy players and all that. That's how you drive interest into your league. That's how you get people interested in your players and all that. So, I mean, RJ Young's doing a good job. He does player profiles. They're doing a lot of stuff in-house. They're not doing enough. I mean, that's just the way it is. And like you said, Reed, there's not a lot of buzz surrounding the league. And
there's not. And
I like the league. I like the league. I watch every game. I've watched every single game at least twice. I'm a nut. So you got me, but if you want to get all the fans, you got to do a lot more. So that's kind of the story there. So they're not doing enough to drum interest. I know people are very apologetic. They're in a hub. You don't understand. They don't care about attendance. They don't care about ratings. What do they care about? I don't know. So do you want to have interest in your league? Do you want to have a buzz? Do you want to have popularity? Do you want to be successful? I don't know. So if you don't care, it's no big deal. But so, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, if attendance wasn't a big deal, which, by the way, to his credit, Moose Johnson came out and he said that he's very disappointed with the attendance, that he's shocked. They knew they were not going to be able to have the same 10 to 12,000 fans that they have, maybe sometimes 17, 18,000 in Birmingham games. They knew they weren't going to have that at the other games, but they didn't expect like 20 fans in the stands. That's a 41,000 seat stadium. I mean, I don't think they thought that the giving out towels was going to be the trick, but they got $10 tickets, free tickets. I can tell you right now, you were in Seattle, you're a Dragons guy. They drew anywhere from 25,000 to 30,000. Imagine how many tickets would have been sold, how many people would have been at the games if the tickets were free, or if the tickets were all $10. I guarantee you, St. Louis, they wouldn't have had room in that stadium if tickets were free, if everybody could get in. So back then we looked at the XFL and we thought, oh my goodness, LA only did 15,000 fans. I hate to say this, but 15,000 fans is like 20 non-Stallions games in the USFL. 50,000 fans is pretty damn good. The big, compared to that. And when you look at it, it's really not just about the attendance, right? So like, okay, big deal. The numbers are big when you look at 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000. What's really important, though, is having people in attendance that are engaged and that are enthusiastic. So like I was at New York Guardians games, and yeah, that's a huge ass stadium, MetLife, 80,000 seat stadium, but they only had like 19,000, 18,000. But I'll tell you what, that crowd was amazing. The DC crowds, they were amazing with the beer snakes. Seattle crowds were great. St. Louis crowd, even the Tampa and LA crowds, I know they didn't have big, large attendance, but 15 to 20,000 is not bad to be honest, that's not bad in a new league when you're competing in places like LA against everything. You're competing against the sun, to get new people to come out to your stadium. It wasn't like they were giving I mean, I'm sure some people got in free, some cases, but they weren't giving away free tickets. Buy one, get to see one game, you get 3 free, or here's a towel, here's sunglasses. They didn't have all these little gimmicks, and they drew pretty well for a brand new league. So that's a big thing too, is when you have fans in your stadium, you want them invested. A lot of these leagues, they have people who are more so spectators. They just come and they don't know anything about the league. They'll come to just watch. They're sitting on their hands. They're not really that interested in it. But when you actually have fans in markets that are invested, that's a special part of the league. Hopefully the XFL is able to capture that in 2023 the way they did in 2020. And hopefully the USFL gets to the point where they can sell off their franchises and they can actually go into individual markets. Because the hub situation, it's great for the financial aspect to survive, but at some point you got to thrive. There have been other leagues that have completed seasons that got to year 3 and 4, like the United Football League, which was a league I watched and enjoyed. Unfortunately, that league, by the time they got to year 3 and 4, they never sold off their franchises. They didn't have quality owners. They didn't get great attendance, and then they went away. So you hope that's not the case with the USFL. We'll see.
I mean, like, that's the thing is, we're talking like, oh, we're gonna find the owners, all that stuff. Like, okay, so let's say they move it. Let's say they move the Maulers into Pittsburgh, and they double ratings, right? So they're getting 580,000, 600,000, right, for the FS1 game, right, on Memorial Day weekend. Like, am I gonna pay millions of dollars and carry all these salaries and carry a venue lease and carry insurance and trainers and coach it? Like, if I'm the owner of this team for 600,000 viewers on FS1, like, maybe. And I don't, like, I'm not a TV exec. I don't know. I got into the argument with Seth, and we had all the rating stuff. It's like, and it was not. I mean, I think it was not fair for Seth to compare, but he compared the ratings, the one cable rating, whatever, on the Saturday, or the Fox rating was like 800,000 for the Birmingham game, and the Spring League back last year, it was like 2.5, 3 times. The USFL rating was like 2.5, 3 times higher than the Spring League rating, and I said, like, so. Fox has invested a year planning with Birmingham. We've taken over a city. We've basically bought Protective. I mean, not really, but we've rented. We have Protective for all this time. We have all these cameras. We have Joel Klatt. We have the lead college announcer. We have Kurt Menefee here. I mean, I know they're with the XFL and stuff. Like, we have all these things. We have banners everywhere. We've bought ads. We've drove this bus around town. We have the NASCAR. We're running ads. We're doing all this stuff. When Brock Heward was on the show, he said that first game that he was at, Super Bowl level of the Fox executives that were there. Because we did our show at that Southern Kitchen there that was across the street. And I was talking to the manager there, Clay, I think was his name. And he said, like, the night before the game, they were hosting like literally every single Fox executive upstairs there. They had like a private patio thing. And then the night after the game, which it's funny story. Andrew will know this. Not many people know this. Seeing Stefan get denied entrance to the pub that we were at after the game, screaming out like, "I did a live show here earlier," as he got escorted out the door, was probably the highlight of my Birmingham thing. But I digress. The after party in that room that night, had everybody there. Had Ed Hartman and Daryl Johnston. I mean, I saw them all going in. Heward and Joel Klatt. Like, you have everybody in the Fox world there, and it's like, well, we're going to get 800,000 viewers a week here. Week 7. Like, I just can't imagine that was their long term plan. Was like, okay, we're going to do 2 times the Spring League, where we didn't pay players and we didn't market and we kept them all in the hotel, and we didn't even do media interviews. I basically had to beg Cole Boozer to get on a Zoom call to be able to do stuff because the league wouldn't do anything like that. I don't think that was their plan here a year ago. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong.
I agree. And
sorry,
there are some people that are lending their ear to people that are connected to the USFL, and they're going to give you their spin that they want out there. So sometimes, you can paint a positive picture. Like, there are certain aspects of the USFL, if you start comparing it to, other entities that have been around forever. I think football, here's the thing, right? You don't want, I know there's a lot of tribalism in this too. You don't want the USFL to prove that nobody cares about Spring League football anymore.
No.
It's actually bad for the XFL.
Yes.
Like if the USFL all of a sudden the tanks and starts doing 300,000 on network television or 400,000, if their ratings keep going down and less people are interested, that doesn't really bode well for the XFL. They might present a more sexier product. We'll see. Well, time will tell. But that's the USFL crashing and burning is not a good thing. So for the market. So I do think there are ways of, if you start comparing it, I see people compare it to like MLS. Look at kills MLS and look how much money MLS gets. Well, MLS has a lot of different things in their favor. Not only have they been around for a long time, they've proven that they can have staying power. They do have staying power, but they also have specific targeted demos. So like, that's easier for advertisers to sell to. The USFL audience is right now that's measuring out the older crowd, 50s, 60s, there and beyond. Nothing against people in 50s, 60s. Hopefully I get there. I'm getting closer. But that's kind of the story there. But and when it comes to MLS, 1/6 of their TV deals also on Spanish speaking stations. So they have a global outreach too. So that's why when they're asking now, maybe they're asking for too much money, but they have a guaranteed specific type audience, and they've kind of earned. I'm not going to say that they deserve 90 million or whatever it is they're asking for, but in today's day and age, if you can bring a specific audience that has value to advertisers, and you have that kind of global outreach, you provide that kind of content, more games, by the way, than a spring pro football league. Then you're going to have a market. Now, I think football is king. I think there is viability. I believe in it. I believe in the spring pro football concept, as crazy as that sounds to people who mock this. I think it can be something that lasts and has power. So I just think the USFL, they from what I know, from the people who are like not trying to put out a different narrative out there, they have expectations and optimism that their numbers can get better. Those things I mentioned earlier in this interview, but they're not completely satisfied with where they sit. They're very disappointed about attendance. Another big thing with Birmingham was the promise, the idea that they would create an event for people in Birmingham to go to, and that they would bring people, local businesses money. So when there's nobody at the games, none of those businesses or vendors or all these people are making money. So if you don't have a product that's drawing in a decent number of people, you're not helping the surrounding areas. So I'm sure that was one of the selling points. Hey, we'll have every Saturday, we'll have 5,000 people here, or 3,000 or 2,000. There'll be families. We're going to let kids in for free. So there'll be families all over the place. Now, I don't know how developed that area is. You were in Birmingham. I wasn't. So I don't know how, if the area surrounding Protective is ready for that kind of business, but it doesn't matter if it was ready or not, because when you have 48 people watching the Maulers play, who cares? So that's kind of the story there. So there are aspects of you expect this, you give a pass to first year leagues, even though this is Fox's third year with the spring league, which is now called USFL, but you expect this. But there are things they definitely know internally that have to get better, and that they're hoping that improve upon. We'll see how it goes the rest of the way. From a football aspect, I can't wait till the playoffs. I'm looking forward to the championship. I'm happy for these players. I'm happy for Mike Riley and the Generals. I've been covering the team. I'm a huge fan of Mike Riley's. He always does good in these non-NFL leagues. He's got a winning record in each and every one of them. So I'm happy for that aspect. From the business aspect, transparency, how the league is being run, I have my qualms.
I got one more comment. If you have anything else, then we'll touch on CFL here before we go. It's like, spoiler alert. Do you want to know why like the cable ratings are not doing good? It is because the people watching the league are 60 years and older, and they're watching Fox and NBC. They're not watching FS1. They're not watching. I mean, and like Peacock is the outlier, because I don't even have Peacock Premium. Like, the times the games have been on, like I've been going to a wedding, and I'm like, I'm not going to buy and sign up to watch 45 minutes of this game before I have to go. But like, they're not watching those games. That is why those ratings are down, right? Because I see like, well, why is USA down? Because 65-year-old people are not like finding FS1 or USA like on the thing, because the USFL has even though they own all these networks and they own everything, they don't have standardized times, right? We're Friday, we're Saturday mornings, we're Sunday nights, all this stuff. And the people they could be getting to watch these, the young kids, the sports gamblers, the fantasy people, they're not doing anything. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when I'm criticizing, Mark Drumheller was on, writes for Yahoo Sports. He goes, Reed, I've been writing for Yahoo Sports the whole season now. Not one person from USFL has ever reached out to me, to talk through, help provide me stats, help provide, like, hey, here's the injury. Like, Mark writes for Yahoo Sports. Like, I can't think of a bigger platform. We're not talking Ian Harditz here, like, as much as I love him and like PFF, like, this is Yahoo freaking Sports writing. He covers NFL, college, UFC, he is their sports betting guy.
Very good guy. Yeah.
And he's like, and he's like, they don't talk to me. It's like, well, so that is why. It's because you have the 60-year-old people that are not watching the cable, the young people that could be watching aren't, because you're not doing anything to entice them to play anything. Because basically, like, Adam Levitan was on and saying he does sports gambling for Establish the Run. He goes, I do this for USFL because I can run circles around the people that are gambling on this, because it's so few people gambling, and it's such a, not dumb, but such an uninformed market, because we don't know that DeAndre Johnson is coming back, or we don't know these players are coming back. So I'm able to run circles around all of them and gamble. That is why I like watching it. Well, that's not a reason to like the league either, because someone can make a lot of money by gambling against people because there's not a lot of people gambling. That doesn't speak well.
You control the information, so transparency is important. I already brought that up earlier, and you brought up a very good point, and we talked about this as far as the demo goes, drawing in younger viewers. And, I understand it's not apples to apples. The XFL was in markets. I get all that. The last week they were in play. They only played 5 weeks. I understand all the criticism against the XFL. They folded, whatever the narrative is out there. But they were in the top 6 in cable. Their last XFL game. We're talking about Tampa Bay Vipers, LA Wildcats, 833,000 viewers. That's pretty good on a late Sunday night on ESPN. But the number that was important was their 18 to 49 demo. They were out of 150 cable shows in week 5 on a late Sunday night, which that game was delayed because of soccer before it. They were 6th. They were 6th behind Walking Dead and a couple of the Real Housewives shows. They were 6th. This is a brand new league that has only been around for 5 weeks, doesn't have a huge identity, doesn't have teams that people know. A lot of people don't know the players, but you need to connect with the younger crowd. The people who are much younger than me. And so you need to reach out, and it doesn't take much. It takes communicating. You need to communicate through your social media, and you need to be more transparent. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here a year from now with maybe, we'll see if the teams get sold, but maybe the same kind of lifeless product that's not getting a lot of buzz. So we'll see. Hopefully not.
Before we go, I could go a lot of directions with CFL stuff. You said you wanted to talk CFL. We got like 10 minutes on this, and then because I got to get this exported. It's 11:30 your time. What do you want to talk CFL? I could go any direction.
Sure. I'm really excited about the upcoming season. Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it. I think we're going to have a better league play than we did a year ago. I think that 2-year layoff was a big factor. Truncated season, COVID restrictions, border restrictions. There was a lot of craziness with the CFL last year. I think it's going to be very exciting. The rule changes with the hash marks are going to be a big factor. I think weak side linebackers are going to be very important in the CFL. They're actually going to have to be forced to cover more space. So I think it's going to be a more wide open game. It's going to be a fun. I'm happy that they were able to get past all the CBA craziness that was going on there for a while. I'm looking forward to Toronto Argonauts season. I think it's pretty cool that the Argos tonight, which would be tonight on Friday, they're going to be streaming the Argos Ticats game. I think that's awesome. The CFL needs to do more of that to connect more people to it. And so I'm definitely looking forward to the season. I think it's going to be tremendous. I think it's going to be wide open. I think it's going to be fun. And I'm looking forward to the Argos. Obviously they're my longtime team. I cover them for CFLnewshub.com. And you and I have a connection to McLeod Bethel Thompson. We're fans of his. And obviously we saw him in the spring league and all that. And we've seen him succeed in the CFL. So we'll see how he does this year. And the Argos have a lot of sex appeal. And with Andrew Harris and Jagarrett Davis and Brandon Speedy B, and all that, and the great history of the franchise. So I'm looking forward to the season. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be an exciting year for CFL fans.
I am enjoying it because, and I think this is probably the most obvious statement in the world, but like I have a really hard time like the first couple weeks of these new leagues, like learning everyone, right? Like figuring out the team identities, right? Even now with USFL, right? We have like Kirby Wilson, like I've called him the Mad King, like he's just going crazy. We have like, I like all the dynamics, right? I love all the interplay with all that. I love having now really been thrown into the fire like we were with the CFL last season, really learning everything. Like, does Cornelius really hang on in Edmonton, right? Does Arbuckle come back? I know Daryl, the writer for CFL News Hub, Arbuckle's his guy, does McLeod, right? Does Chad Kelly come in there, right? Edmonton, we have, Kenny Lawler, right? Like highest paid wide receiver in the league. We don't know who his quarterback is. BC, the Nathan Rourke thing, I'm so excited about because it's either going to be like the biggest success, and it would I think honestly, like if the Rourke Michael O'Connor thing works, where they're both Canadians, right? For people, I don't know who's still listening at this point, but if you don't, like it's the two starting Canadian quarterbacks, hasn't happened in like 50 years in the CFL.
I'm an American and I'm rooting for that, Reed. I'm a fan of Nathan Rourke's. I think it would be so cool because, everybody talks about the ratio and everything else. When you look at it, honestly, all the top quarterbacks in Canada and the CFL are Americans.
Well, and
so it'd be great. It would be awesome if Nathan Rourke was a major. I'm rooting for him. He's like my dark horse to, he's got Lucky Whitehead and Brian Burnham. So that's a pretty awesome as long as Lucky stays healthy. Ironically enough, he hasn't really been lucky with injuries. But I think Nathan Rourke has a real chance to be a megastar. He just looks the part. Hopefully he plays the part. He kind of has like a little bit of like a young Brady thing going on there. So if he was, if he turns out to be a megastar, it would be such an awesome story. It's great when national players like that, become superstars. It's like, it's a big part of the Canadian Football League. So I'm definitely rooting for him. Plus I like BC. I've always, even though I'm an Argos guy, I've always liked BC's uniforms, logo, colors, all that stuff. So they have a cool fan base, cool franchise.
Well, it could change the narrative of the Canadian, because with all this, with the CBAs and the ratio and all that, like you said, I want Canadian talent to succeed, right? I think that needs to be important in the Canadian Football League. And if you could have Nathan Rourke and Michael O'Connor find success in that way, it could just change the narrative. I just think it's exciting. I think every team, right? I saw Vernon, Adams is coming back, right? Like he hasn't had any, play time since his big injury, right? Obviously he's been on the show.
Montreal's a scary team. Montreal's like one of my dark horses to win it all. You got Stanback, a healthy Vernon Adams, like a great receivers. So, this could be fascinating to watch Vernon Adams play this year.
Yeah, Calgary, right? We have Jake Mayer, right? He's been on the show. The Mayor, does he take over for Bo this year? Do we give Bo another year the whole way through? I mean, I don't see Bo lasting 18 games right through the season. So I think
something's going on with Bo. I think people are like pushing. He wasn't very good last year. He had his moments. He's got awesome receivers, Reggie Beggleton and otherwise, but might be the most dominant receiver in the league. But he came on late after coming back from the NFL. But I'm worried about Bo. You've seen some signs in the preseason that he doesn't look like the same player. And injuries might have caught up to him. So this is a big year for him. I mean, for one of the CFL's most decorated superstars on the pivot there, it would be tough to see him fade away, and not be the player he used to be. But I don't know. Something's going on there. I don't know. Jake Mayer could take over there. That's a tough one. That's a difficult person to bench because he has the championship pedigree and he's always been a superstar in the league. But we'll see when the season starts. Perhaps the narrative on that will change, but I'm seeing some signs that maybe he's not going to be the player he was, perhaps, as you say, because of injuries.
I just want the games to be good because a lot of the games last year were not good. Like I that's all I want is I had heard through all this XFL stuff, like, the CFL game and the business doesn't matter. It's when you get on the field and it's the purest and we have the best athletes and they're fast and they're like the huge open field and we throw for 1,000,000 yards. And then like you watch the games and like, I remember it was one of the BC's last games and they tied with Toronto. They went to overtime because Dinwiddie couldn't figure out the clock and they need too early. And like, Toronto scored and they got the 2-point conversion and the BC scored. And I'm like, Michael Riley is never getting this 2-point conversion. Like, it's not happening. Like, I don't care. Michael Riley is the greatest quarterback in whatever in the last 10 years in the CFL. Like, he's not getting this 2-point conversion. They didn't get the 2-point conversion. They lost the game. Like,
you're picking out a game that at least had some level of excitement because I know there were some games last year with the Red Blacks in Edmonton which neither offense could get anything going or whatever. So that at least that game had excitement and scoring and big plays down the field and all that. At least you picked out, even though there was some bonehead things that went on there. You mentioned Dinwiddie, unfortunately, but he was one one of the CFL candidates for a coach of the year there. But yeah, there was some sloppy play last year. There was some, you had situations where guys were down to their fourth and fifth quarterback playing in the rain. Like crazy kind of like sloppy games. And, unfortunately, I think Ottawa's going to be better this year. That's going to help. I think Edmonton's going to be better this year. They were very bad last year, those two teams. I think they'll be more competitive, and that'll bring up the level of play. It always comes down to the quarterbacks. But, Ottawa could be interesting with Masoli's hit or miss, kind of bipolar. But I think they'll be a little bit more exciting this year.
Yeah, it was the Ottawa against like the Elks. I think it was one of those Wednesday games. It was that rain game. And I'm like, nobody is watching this game. Like it's 7-3 in the fourth quarter. Like nobody is watching this game right now. There's, you want to talk about Birmingham attendance. I'm like, there's like 500 people here. It's pouring rain. Like nobody is watching the CFL game.
Yeah, and I see people trash. That's funny. You said that. Yeah, that was probably the low light of the CFL season. They had the playoffs. The Grey Cup was fun. I guess more fun if you're not a Hamilton Tigers Cats fan and watching how that ended. But Grey Cup was fun. There was some hot playoff games and all that. And, it was, it was a unique season in the CFL. I'm glad they're playing because they were really teetering. If they were not starting this season, they're teetering on doing damage to their league. Long term, some would argue that there's been some damage over the last few years anyway. But I'm glad that they were able to rectify that. And I think it's a wonderful league. I do think there are some aspects that need to improve. And we'll see if these rule changes help. I think people are going to see that the hash marks, the hash mark change is going to be a big factor in opening up space for offenses. I think you'll see that. You're going to see scoring go up.
I like how Danny Austin tweeted. He said, like, I never realized, and we had Jim Mullen on the show last week talking about, the pass and all this stuff, but like, when the CFL changed the hash marks, U Sports still plays with the old hash marks. So now there's just like a million hash marks on the field because a lot of these games are like on soccer fields, and then you have like the college game, and then we have the CFL. Like there's just a million hash marks on every field. Plus, we're gonna have the digital ads. I'm assuming so we'll have the marks, whatever Labor Day special, and then we're gonna have a million hash marks. I'm very excited.
Yeah, me too. For anyone who hasn't checked out, give the CFL a chance. I've been a fan my whole life, so it's a great league. It's fun to watch. There's so much history behind it, and so I think it's gonna be a fun season. Anybody who hasn't given it a shot, give it a shot by now. I guarantee you'll like it. I mean, if you're an Argos fan, you'll like it even better. I think they're gonna be really good.
Mike, this is your last chance. Anything you want to share before we get out of here?
Oh man, I think we've covered everything possible. No ELF talk tonight, although I'm happy they're in play. Thanks, Reed, for having me on. I appreciate it.
This will be good. We'll see. I no doubt there'll be feedback online. I'm sure. I think I will probably get more like Reed was just indignant about a lot of stuff than you. I don't think you shared anything. I always tell Mike, like, it's like my all-time favorite podcaster, Rob Cesternino, when he talks about Survivor. He says, I don't want to know the spoilers because I want to be able to podcast freely about everything. And I always tell Mike, like, don't tell me anything we're not supposed to know because you never know when I'm going to talk and blurt something out. So, that's the level we're at. I don't care because I don't want to get anybody in trouble with anything we're not supposed to know.
That's awesome. If you have any questions you want to ask me, I can always give you a no comment.
That's good.
But I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there want to know a lot. There's exciting times coming up. There's going to be a lot of big news coming. So I know the June 1st thing was a disappointment for a lot of people out there, but cities are coming. They're not canceling the season.
It's going to be good. All right. Mike Mitchell, XFL, CFL, USFL News Hub. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Reed. Appreciate it.